resisting the technological enslavement system. This is the Live Free or Die radio show with your host, Lee Rogers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the show. Today is March 22nd, 2011, and thank you very much for tuning in tonight. You can check out my website at roguegovernment.com, and we are going to be here with you for the entire 3 hours, commercial-free, and joining me for his monthly visit is my guest who will be with me the entire 3 hours. His name is Josh Reeves. You can check out his website at theglobalreality.com. You can check out his documentary films, his radio show, pretty much everything that he has done over the past several years of work. You can check out up on that website. And Josh, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing well, Lee. Thanks for having me on again. It's good to be back with you. I know we haven't done this in a while. We didn't get to do it last month, but I was very busy, and I know you were as well. So it's good to be back with you. And my goodness, of the things that have happened since the last time we've talked.
Oh, it's completely insane. And this is one of those shows where I wish we had like 6 hours because
you almost needed to cover this much. Yeah.
Yeah. To make up for last month. There's just so much insanity taking place. But before we get into everything going on with Libya, Japan, the phony patriot movement, and the whole 9 yards, I just wanted to give you a chance to tell the audience some of the things that you've been doing over the past couple of months. I know you're in a band and you've been doing some gigs. So I just want to give you the chance to tell tell the audience what you've been doing.
Well, yeah, it's kind of turned into one of those things where, I don't tell my audience or the people that listen to my show, and I know you don't either, Lee. We don't ever tell people anything to do that we aren't doing ourselves. You know, we don't tell people to do a radio show or make a film or run a website or, get in a band and get the word out about this stuff unless we're doing it ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that, you've got to put your money where your mouth is when it comes to doing this kind of stuff. You have to be just as active in trying to change the mindsets around from what they currently are for no other reason than for the safety of the rest of us. While at the same time, you've got to be, finding ways to do that yourself. And so for me, one of the with a multifaceted attack, I mean, you run the website and you run roguegovernment.com and you do your show and make films. And I run my little network and in my show and the theglobalreality.com and also make films and also play in a band, the Demigods. And we're playing out. And that's one of the greatest things about that is when we go out and play for people and we have, lyrics that are about relevant stuff in our music. And when you go out and talk to people now, it used to be when we first started, even a year ago, we just had our year anniversary as a band. And it seemed like when we first went out, people looked at us kind of like we were out of our minds. But now everywhere we go, we meet people that know what's going on. They know about, global government. They know about everything that's happening. And it's not just that, Lee, but I'm finding more and more people that know about the phony patriots and know about and the fraud of Alex Jones and know the rest of this stuff. And when they find out that, I've already done work and made a film about the secret right, and then they can pick one of those up at our gig. And man, it's amazing because, for instance, we played this big house party a couple of weeks ago that was after a big music festival in Denton, Texas. And there were a couple of guys there who were into Alex Jones, and my sister Jamie started telling them about the CMP and stuff. And then I came over and talked to them about it, and they were just blown away. And we gave them some free stickers. And at the end of the night, these guys were like huddled up in the corner in a room somewhere as we were leaving with our gear out on a cell phone camera or like a little cell phone thing watching The Secret Right there, So that's the whole thing is that what I've been doing, what I try to do more and more is to find whatever outlet, whatever way we can to get information out to as many people. Because not everybody likes to listen to talk radio like we do. Not everybody likes to, watch YouTube films or whatever. But, a lot of people like music or a lot of people like art or whatever else. So that's kind of the thing I'm trying to stress to people, Lee, is that, a lot of people think, well, what can I do? There's not anything I can do, and I don't have a talent to do anything. Well, I think that's absolute hogwash. I think everybody out there has something that they can do to get the word out. And the thing that it is now is that since there's more things that are happening every day, and like, as you mentioned, the little laundry list you went there of current events that are happening, all these things happening at such a rate that they are now, it's almost, it's almost unignorable for people at this point, Lee. It's now finally reaching the point where I think it's affecting every single person's lives. And so people are finding, less and less of an opportunity to be able to get out of being knowledgeable about this stuff. But for me, I'm just continuing to work on the films, continue to do that in any way, shape, or form, and getting the word out. So I think that's what I can definitely try to encourage other people to do that. But we're hoping to have the Secret Volume 2 out again in the next 3 or 4 weeks. right now I've got to go back and try to get some more original footage shot to put in there, and it should be good. And they keep giving us ammo, don't they? That's the amazing thing.
Well, certainly, and we're going to definitely get into some of these events that occurred over the past couple of months pertaining to all the phony patriots and really the whole notion about how a lot of this conspiracy research stuff is really dominated by the New World Order itself. And I always found it very interesting why they have individual experts for almost any particular issue or subject you can think of. And I believe that is by design. I believe these people are plants and are put in place to serve as gatekeepers for these particular topics or subjects or piece of information. But we'll get into that later, Josh. I mean, we have a lot to talk about on that subject for sure. But I mean, geez, again, that could be a show in of itself. It's just so crazy. But first, I wanted to get your take on some of the more current events that are going on, namely Libya and Japan. So I guess what we'll start with Libya, since that seems to be the big story of the day. What's your thoughts on what's happening with Libya and this obviously staged operation that's ongoing in the Middle East?
Well, we've got a continuing operation here of what we already know it is. And as I saw that you posted the article yesterday up on roguegovernment.com as well, so people can go check that out there. But, the little reference made by Vladimir Putin about this being, a crusade in the Middle East, it's almost like when you have that statement, there's not really much more I can add because it's 100% accurate because we know that's what it is. And this is a destabilization program throughout the Middle East. It's definitely there to destabilize the region and to give the phony state of Israel more power in the region and basically be the controllers over that area. It's what they want. And also, to me, the biggest thing that sticks out about all this, and of course, as to your average person, Lee, when they see, the stories in the news about Libya and they wonder how, well, number one, this is the majority of things that I've talked about with people. This is what they've said to me. Number one, they don't understand why we're there, and that's an understandable thing. They don't understand why we're interfering in this and why we're engaged in this, and they don't understand why gas prices are high. Now, that's things at the base level that average everyday people are concerned with, and I think that the most interesting thing is the fact that now, as we see gas prices continue to climb, it becomes more and more apparent that as they ran the destabilization program in Egypt, Yemen, now in Libya, the plan here is to be able to stir up enough stuff and to stir up enough crap in the Middle East and in Saudi Arabia as well, so that they have total civil unrest, throw the country up into upheaval, and then have the ability to be able to change the OPEC treaty to be able to have the oil traded in things other than dollars, rubles, won, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When that happens, it's I don't know. I'm wondering if that's going to be the next play for war. I'm wondering if that's what the next thing is going to be. It's really hard to say at this point, but to me, it does look like, considering the news you and I have covered over the past year or two, how many stories we had about basket currencies and the IMF and changing things around so that OPEC is. Everybody didn't have to put all their money into dollars in order to buy oil out of Saudi Arabia. I mean, I think this is the big play for this. They're shifting around the world order and making the plays for what there is no better term for what the new world order will be. We've got a shifting of the world order, and now we are seeing it format into what is going to be the major players. I think this is the first salvo of that, but I also, at the same time, as I do most things that I look at this, I also see a much deeper thing going on here. I mean, I can't ignore the connections between Egypt and Yemen and Libya and, of course, Iraq before that. I just can't ignore. Yeah, I can't ignore that. Yes. And also in Japan, where you have, was it Namaguchi or whatever it is, the step pyramid that's right off the coast of Japan that was found, not too long ago, a buried city there. I mean, we're starting to see things that are activating, it seems, underneath our earth that may have been planted there thousands of years by, God knows who. But I can't think it's a coincidence, Lee, when we start to see all these things happening and civil unrest happening where we know there are antiquities and things that play into the much larger power scheme that these people are trying to control.
Yeah, sure. And that's one thing that I think is very fascinating, because we know that the priest classes always had this fascination with these archaeological sites and artifacts. And we really started to notice this back, of course, in 2003 when they raided the Baghdad Museum following the American invasion, and then all these antiquities were stolen and they wound up on the black market. So I think that's a very interesting correlation to look at, especially when you consider what's in Yemen, what's in Egypt. I mean, they came out with a news story just a short period of time ago talking about how they believe that in, I think it was a Great Pyramid, that there's these additional chambers that have not been looked at. And that came out right before you had all this civil uprising and unrest in that country. So it's definitely very fascinating. But shifting gears out of the Middle East, of course, the other big story that we've seen in the corporate control media has been what's going on over in Japan, as you briefly talked about. And of course, we had the earthquake, we had the tsunami, and then we had this nuclear reactor disaster, which everybody in the Patriot community has been fear-mongering about. They've been talking about how this radiation is going to come over here. You got people like Alex Jones price gouging people for $40 for a bottle of these potassium iodide pills. I mean, it's completely out of control. So what's your take on what's going on over in Japan and how it pertains to a lot of this fear-mongering that's going on?
Well, it's interesting because it just seems that I covered this on my show last night. I seem to see all of these various explanations that people are now offering up for the cause of this thing. And I think what's interesting about that is the fact that it just causes more, it just causes confusion in people. It causes cognitive dissonance to where people don't know what to believe. I mean, we've seen everything from, it's the obvious stuff with, they did this with HARP, or, this is what's caused by the supermoon, or this was caused by Nibiru, or this was caused by...
Well, Josh, I mean, real quick, HARP always seems like it's this common excuse that's basically imprint into the minds of all of these patriots and truthers. Oh, it's got to be HARP. That's like a common explanation for almost anything.
No, it is, and I think that's by design as well. I think that's what they over and over they regurgitate these things, and what they've done is they've created a nomenclature, right? Where as soon as we hear about something, we just say, okay, that's HARP, and then it shuts off in our minds, and then we go no farther than that. Well, if we're only thinking that there's one explanation to any of these things, then they've got us already. That's exactly what they count on us thinking. And now they are using the conspiracy nomenclature as another way to gatekeep and give them the ability to not give people the whole truth. So, I mean, it's just funny to me. And then we had another story about, it was caused by the end of the world because Jesus is coming back, all this stuff.
The Reverend Graham, right. Is that the story you referred to?
Yeah.
That guy's a complete jackass.
And you look at, you think about that and you really think about, well, why would they be doing this? Why would they be creating all this cognitive dissonance and creating division where, you have one aspect of the people that believes it's this or that and the other? The only reason that they ever do that, Lee, as well as I do, is because the real reason that it's caused by is something they don't want people to find out about. I see very similarities between this earthquake and this tsunami and 9/11. I mean, it's hard to deny the characteristics, especially in sort of the cognitive dissonance aspect, where they did the same thing with 9/11. They put out the official story, then the official story came out, and then you had 20 different explanations from the conspiracy world or the truth world or whatever else, and you had people over here believing in no planes and believing in holograms and laser beams, people over here believing thermite and everything else, but we're still no closer to the truth. And all it does is divide people and get people from not looking at the issue at hand. And the issue at hand of all of this should be is that, well, number one, none of this stuff with Japan, all this stuff could have happened. We know they have the mitigation technology to mitigate earthquakes, to mitigate tsunamis, any of the rest of this stuff. And so if they're not using it for mitigation, what are they using it for? They're using it to make it worse. So regardless of that, if they had knowledge of this, if they caused it to happen, honestly, I don't really care. It really doesn't matter to me. The fact of the matter is whether they created it or whether they didn't, just like with 9/11, whether it was lie hop or my hop, whether it was let it happen on purpose or made it happen on purpose, same thing here. We said the same thing about the Haiti thing. Honestly, it doesn't matter because they have capitalized on this. They've used it to further the agenda, and I believe that's what they're going to continue to do. And again, as you mentioned, with these hucksters, price gouging people on sodium iodide and all this stuff, it's obvious this is an operation. Doesn't take much convincing, I don't think, Lee.
Well, absolutely. And I think you brought up a really good point about the fact that it seems as if with all these various events, and especially with events like 9/11 or these really game-changing type of events, you have what takes place in terms of the conspiracy movement. You have all these different explanations, and you got people arguing back and forth over different theories about what happened that day. And really, it doesn't matter exactly what happened per se, because like you said, the most important thing is the fact they're going to use that event or any number of events to achieve their ultimate goal, which is the establishment of a totalitarian one-world government on the system. And that's the most important thing to understand. So while people are arguing over the minutia of different events like 9/11 or the Japanese earthquake, or as you mentioned, the Haiti earthquake, or any of these are questionable events that have a number of possible explanations, we're missing the big picture, which is the fact that they're just moving the agenda ahead forward, using these events that create chaos. And then, of course, they bring in their solutions and they drop their new plans to push ahead their agenda. So I think that's a very important point that you made.
I do too. I mean, I just want to say before we move on here that oftentimes blows people away, and they often don't know how to react to that when you approach them with that sort of that mindset on things. You know, I've told people many times, look, I don't give a damn if you believe no planes were used on 9/11 or space beams or anything else. If that's what you believe, and you believe it with the knowledge points you in that direction, and you're unchangeable from that, that doesn't make me look at you as less of a person because that's your belief and not mine. But it seems that also the conspiracy culture also tries to make it that way, where I thought this was supposed to be about an open investigation and not supposed to be about everybody believing the same thing. When you're trying to look at something scientifically to find out the truth of it, then you want a various amount of people that are all looking at data that have different standpoints, because that's how you become closer to the truth, by being able to eliminate certain things. So I see that as a problem, that we've gotten to the point where we're supposed to all be in agreement about these things, when instead we should all be in an agreement that what they told us as the official story is BS, and then move from there.
Exactly. And that's the most important thing to understand. But I see a lot of people that they like to use these subtle disagreements as ways to try to out people as being disinformation operatives or something along those lines. And as far as I'm concerned, people who use those tactics are questionable in of themselves, because, again, the main issue is the fact that they're using these events to push forward a greater agenda, and the official story of a lot of these different events are complete lies. And that's the broader overall picture that we have to recognize.
Yeah, but just don't believe what they tell you, and we're going to be all right.
Right, exactly. That's pretty much a good rule of thumb. But Josh, I want to move forward and cover some other issues here. And of course, one of the other big news stories that took place while, over the past couple months, has, of course, been this whole Charlie Sheen debacle. And I have to get your take on this, because really what's happened here is that this whole situation with Sheen and that ridiculous interview that he conducted, or that was conducted by Alex Jones, has really launched Alex Jones into the mainstream. And we've been talking about this for the past 2 or 3 years, about how eventually this guy was going to be launched into the mainstream. And I think this whole Charlie Sheen incident, with him acting like a complete lunatic, whether or not you believe that he was on drugs or acting like he was on drugs, that event on the Alex Jones show is now being used to bring Alex Jones into the mainstream. And I think he's going to become the next Rush Limbaugh. They already have a Rolling Stone magazine article on him, conveniently. That was all prep before this event took place. So what's your thoughts on Alex Jones officially going to the mainstream, and what this means for the overall Patriot and Truth movement?
It's not a surprise, and really, what it means to the overall Patriot and Truth movement is going to be up for those people to define, really, and not me, because I don't consider myself a part of that anyway. So it's not really up to me to define what that is. I would think that maybe it might be a good opportunity for since he's going mainstream now, all the way mainstream. I mean, my goodness, all the stuff going on in the world. That was my initial thing, Lee, was, all this stuff is going on in the world, and you feel the need to fly out to New York to go on The View to defend Charlie Sheen when the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and that's the most important thing. I mean, that was it. I mean, that was the thing where I was like, well, anything else that may happen and anything else that we can say about this really is just icing on the cake, considering that, because that's pretty big. I mean, my goodness, how can you have any sort of credibility left? That's the most important thing on your plate. A real researcher would have said, you know what? I don't have time to talk about Charlie Sheen and what crap he's doing, anything else right now. We've got all this stuff going on in the world we need to deal with. We can't get people awake about that, but we're going to harp on what this coked out actor is doing. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The whole thing was staged to get the exact response that it needed. The fact of the matter is, Columbia Broadcasting System. My goodness. I mean, that was my the big all-seeing eye. This is where his show was at, people. Don't you see these signs? This is not an accident. Charlie Sheen's show was not on Columbia Broadcasting System with the all-seeing eye for no apparent reason. It's a part of the operation. But the fact of the matter is, the show's ratings were in the toilet. The only reason the show had good ratings to begin with when it first came on was because he went on the Jones show in the first place and did his 9/11 spill. But since then, it's been on a slow decline. They were paying this guy $2 million an episode. They needed a way to get out of the contract without making it look like they dropped Charlie Sheen and out a way without CBS making it look bad. So what did they do? They staged a thing where Sheen, the crazy guy, goes on air and yells, Jewy Jewenstein or whatever it was he was yelling, Kike Kikenstein or whatever he was yelling, all this, blah, 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 blah. And then the next thing they let him go and whatever else. And there's a convenient thing for Sheen where, oh, hey, it's just Sheen, the crazy person. That's what it is. And then, CBS had to let him go. Very convenient for CBS, very convenient for Charlie Sheen, and very convenient for Alex Jones with him being smack dab in the middle of this. And as you stated, with his career being furthered. So, I mean, c'est la vie is as far as I see it. The main reason it's even important to continue to even talk about this stuff and still cover it is because there are much deeper elements to this. My worry and fear was that people were going to remember this event with Charlie Sheen as being the thing that discredited Alex Jones, and I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that that's not it, because I don't give a damn about his antics with Charlie Sheen and the rest of his stuff, to be honest with you. I'm concerned about his connection to the Jesuit order through the John Birch Society. I'm concerned with his connection to the Council for National Policy and the bloodlines and people like Phyllis Schlafly and on and on and on. That's the issue. Those are the things that we should be concerned with, whether or not Jones is what he says he is or what he isn't. Those are the things, not whether or not he, is a shill and a puppet for Charlie Sheen and all the rest of it. I really don't care about that, even though it distinctly ties in, especially with the Sheens and the Jesuits and the rest of that. But honestly, I don't want that to be the thing that people remember why they believed Alex Jones was a fraud. There's real information that plays into the top of the levels of all this stuff that we talk about. And to me, those are the things that people need to continue to be educated about, because that's what matters, not what he's doing on TV or anything else,
Absolutely. It's more than just the whole Sheen debacle. I mean, that's just icing on the cake. I mean, that's just one of many topics and pieces of information that we can discuss that proves that this guy is working on behalf of the New World Order, just like a lot of these other characters and clowns that you see in the alternative research community that are posing as if they're doing us a favor by providing us this wonderful insight as to what's going on. And I got to tell you what, folks, I mean, all these experts, they're put there to tell you how to think. And we don't need these experts. We don't need these people telling us how to think in the corporate media or the alternative media. And Josh, that's why I rarely have guests on this show, because
me too.
I don't feel the need to have people on my show telling me how to think about something. I just don't. And there just seems to be these hand-selected people that are experts in these different areas I covered before, and it's just a really irritating thing. But Josh, pertaining to this Council for National Policy stuff, and I can't remember if I asked you about this on the previous time that you were on or not. It may have happened after the fact. I can't remember. But you came across this video footage in his documentary film Endgame 1.5 that point blank shows Phyllis Schlafly. She's behind this podium, and it says Council for National Policy. And this is very interesting. I want to get your take on this, but just to preface this for the audience, again, the Council for National Policy is a secretive organization founded back in the early 1980s as all these globalists that are a part of this. And then you have all these people that are tied in with the Patriot movement who appear on the Alex Jones show that have been members of this group or have been linked to this group in some way. And so this group, it meets 3 times in secret, free from press coverage. The only way you can get into these meetings is if you have very close connections to the group. So he was able to somehow obtain footage, either one of his crew members himself or a friend of his was able to get into the meeting and actually film footage inside a Council for National Policy meeting. And I have not seen any video footage from inside a Council for National Policy meeting in the 2 years I've been doing research, except for this footage that has appeared in this Alex Jones film. So I just want to get your thoughts on this and why this is such a significant thing.
Well, I kind of thought that maybe he was, for the longest time, had been hoping we weren't going to find this footage. And I was going back through the In-Game 1 film, because in that film he had a lady from the National Eagle Forum in that film. In part 1, he had Dr. Michael Kaufman, the former Council for National Policy president, in that film. He had quite a few connections to the Council for National Policy in that film. And yes. I can remember when I first found out. I'd known about the CMP for maybe a month or two. And I remember when I first found out back in 2007 that Dr. Michael Kaufman was in Endgame and was the CMP president, after I had already found all these other connections, to Jones and the CMP. And that was really the big thing for me, Lee. I was like, oh, this is undeniable. And then I had a chance to meet Dr. Michael Kaufman back in 2008, and I tried to interview him. And I tell you, I've talked to a lot of these people at events. I mean, at that event, we saw Phyllis Schlafly. We saw Larry Pratt, got him on tape for the Secret Volume 1. And I've talked to Tom DeWeese. I talked to Jerome Corsi. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of these people, they're very nice people. They seem just like regular people. A lot of them, I mean, you can definitely tell there is massive compartmentalization going on within the CMP because, for instance, Jerome Corsi, I mean, he has no bones about it. I mean, he's very pleasant in talking about the CMP and talking about that he's a member and they were going to run him as president one year. And he's very, very amiable when it comes to talking about it. Not at all standoffish or anything else. So, I get the impression he's probably at the lower level, but then you see somebody like, Phyllis Schlafly or anybody else, and they just go on the defensive. And to me, that speaks volumes for the group, and it speaks volumes for the fact that there's probably definitely compartmentalization going on where you have certain people who think that the group just does meet and have dinners or whatever else and doesn't have any power. And then you have a whole other level of people that definitely know what's going on. But I was going through and I went through In-Game 1.5, and there's a segment in there where he's talking about the law of the sea treaty. And I remember when Jones first came out with In-Game back in 2007, he was bragging about how it was the first film that he ever made where they didn't have to get any of their clips from the news archives. He was like, folks, this is the first movie, folks. This is the first movie I've ever made. It has all my footage in it, folks. It's all footage I've shot with my crew and my cameras, and that's what it is. And he said that probably, I don't know, dozens of times on his radio show when they came out, and that kept reverberating in my head. And I looked and I saw that, and I just kind of fell back on my butt in my chair. I was kind of like, you've got to be kidding me. And there it is, crystal clear, high-def footage. And what's interesting is if you watch the film, especially if you're a filmmaker, I don't know if other people out there, regular people, have an eye for this stuff like I do or you do, but especially if you watch it in good quality, you can tell that the frame and the grain on the camera and the color and everything else is matched against other footage that's in the film. So in my professional opinion, whether or not, I like Jones or don't like him, my professional impression from video equipment and looking at those things would be that was shot on the same footage, on the same cameras as the rest of his stuff was. So the question is, all these clips that we have from 2009, 2010, 2011, where Jones says, folks, I hadn't even heard about this group until recently. I knew nothing about it. Well, how come you have clips of this Phyllis Schlafly in front of the podium speaking at a meeting where, we can't even find out where the meetings are going to be? They don't even give us an opportunity to find out where the meetings are going to be and go out in front of them and, take pictures to see who's coming in and out of them like they do at Bilderberg. That was my biggest question, and then, of course, that's answered by the connections of Willis Carto to people like Roger Pearson and the Eugenics Foundations. It's unbelievable. So
yeah, Jim Tucker. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Tucker, is writing for Willis Carto's paper, and Willis Carto's the guy that brought over one of the top eugenicists to the United States, Roger Pearson. Roger Pearson admittedly was helping Mengele down in South America with his experiments. It's unbelievable stuff, and it's a whole rabbit hole of information that you can dive into. But to me, Jonesy's credibility is shot either way on this, because if he tries to say, well, I didn't know that was in there, and somebody put that in there, and I don't know where it came from, well, then that proves he's a liar, because we already know that he said 7 Ways to Sunday 1 million times on his show that he controls every aspect of his films. He controls every aspect of cutting them, putting them together, and everything else. So to me, this has been the biggest smoking gun we've had quite yet. You wrote an article about it. I talked about it on my show ad nauseum, but I tell you what, dude, people have been quieter about this than anything I've ever seen. People are trying to ignore this piece of information hardcore. So I'm glad we're here tonight again talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes beyond that. I mean, Jones has had Charlotte Iserby on his show, and he asked her point blank about the Council for National Policy, and she was talking about how it's an institution that promotes globalist ideologies. And look, I'm not a big fan of Iserby, and we've talked about this before, but she was speaking some real truths on that broadcast. And then later on, he brings on, who was it? Phyllis Schlafly to ask these questions, and they just turn it into a complete whitewash. And he continues to have these Council for National Policy clowns on his show, and he doesn't ask them any questions. And just recently, just today, he had Ray the Jesuit McGovern on his broadcast. 27 years in the CIA, and he's running around doing all these phony these phony incidents with Donald Rumsfeld and Hillary Clinton, and everybody in the alternative media is getting all up in arms about, oh, geez, they assaulted poor Ray McGovern. I mean, I think all those incidents are staged. I mean, what do you think about Ray McGovern and all this funny business with him and Hillary Clinton and all that stuff? Have you heard about that?
Yeah. I mean, you know what they say, though, Lee. Once agency, always agency. I don't think that guy's retired from Jack Diddley squat. I don't think he ever has been. Those guys don't retire. And essentially what they do is yes, they take them out of day-to-day operations, but what they go into what is sometimes referred to as personal operations, meaning they put out the appearance to everybody that they're retired, but they're writing books and they're doing book tours, and maybe they have an article in such and such Atlantic magazine or whatever else, but you always notice, and then in the case of Ray McGovern, all of a sudden Ray McGovern leaves the CIA and becomes one of the most outspoken anti-war people. How many of these incidents have we now had that Ray McGovern has been connected to? He's a part of this operation to try and stir up civil unrest and have somebody who lends an air of credibility to it. I also think it's coincidental that Ray McGovern got into the CIA right before Kennedy was assassinated. I mean, it seems like Jones always wants to overlook that. That seems pretty big to me.
Well, also, I was reading some information on McGovern, and apparently he worked closely with Henry Kissinger. Yeah. I mean, this guy delivered these presidential daily briefings to high-level people in the Reagan administration. This guy was high level. This wasn't some analyst that was low level in the CIA. This guy was high up there, and we're supposed to believe that he's some great person that's on our side. It's completely ridiculous to believe that that's the case. And I really hope people start to understand what's going on here with all these operatives and these people that are put out there, because the fact of the matter is, and it's kind of a scary thing when you start to understand how controlled this is, but realistically, like I was saying before, when you look at the Patriot movement, when you look at a lot of these personalities and experts, you're basically looking at the New World Order. That is the New World Order right there, and there's a lot of people who still have not accepted that fact.
Well, I mean, the alternative media has been around long enough now to where we've been on their radar for an extensive amount of time. So you would be a complete fool and you'd be completely naive to think that they aren't finding counterintelligence ways to slip things in and wreak havoc. And again, back to the naivety thing, I think that's one of the things that they really count on. People are ignorant to the fact. I mean, Jones just gets up there on his show, and I bought into it before in the past. I think a lot of people out there probably have, but he'll get up there on the show and act like you're just supposed to trust whoever the guy was that wrote Syriana, or, all these spooks, just spook after spook after spook. And they think that we don't know that 9 times out of 10, these guys are still in operations, even though they've effectively left the CIA. You don't leave the CIA unless you die. That's a fact. So we've got to get over this thing of just believing all of these ex-government insiders and fathers of Reaganomics and all this other stuff. These guys, as you said, this is the enemy. They have trotted the enemy back out in front of us and got us to believe that these people who comprise the enemy are our friends and are on our side. This is insanity. Why are we believing this? People need to wake up and realize that people that worked on the inside, there is no such thing as a real whistleblower. They don't exist. Understand that. They are put there to get you roped back in to their ideologies so they can control the perimeters of what change is. And that agent of change that we have in there right now, the warmonger, who is no different than Bush, he has effectively brought that in and brainwashed millions of left-wingers and got right-wingers believing he's the Antichrist. I mean, all of this stuff is just playing out perfectly for them. But thank goodness we're able to still have a voice and still put this out there so people can decide for themselves what's real and what isn't. That's the most important thing.
Well, definitely. And, this brings me to another point, and that's the fact that we need more people doing radio shows, starting up their own platforms, because when you take a look at the totality of what is going on with the proverbial alternative media or the conspiracy research community, I would say the vast majority of it, when you start looking at this objectively, they are working for the enemy. There's absolutely no question about that. So we need more people doing shows and putting out information on these subjects so we can counter all this disinformation that's put out there. And, Josh, another thing that I find very interesting about all of this is that when you look at the mainstream patriot and truth communities, there is never any emphasis on the Jesuits, the Vatican, or anything that relates to Christian dominionists, like these evangelicals, like Tim LaHaye and these other characters that you see associated with the Council for National Policy. It's like that information doesn't exist. It's like, well, there's nothing to see here. And just believe that, the Illuminati is trying to destroy the world, and we're these great Christians. We're going to rise up against the Illuminati, and it's going to be wonderful. And that's another paradigm that I see that has been created by design. And you can read about this in Tim LaHaye's writings, as well as our dominionist writings, these Christian dominionists. And they talk about this struggle between Christians and humanists. And I believe that this is another phony paradigm that they're going to be creating and crafting so they can bring in a one world religion at some point in the future. What do you think about that, Josh? Do you think that's something that might happen?
Well, it's definitely no. I don't think that it may happen. I think it's going to happen. I think they're definitely making moves for it to happen. That's what all this is about. And you're exactly right. There's a whole other level to this information that is plausible. We're being given this again, another programmed mindset to control the perimeters of what this is about. I mean, it was mind blowing for me. I'll tell you what's funny. I was telling this to a friend the other day. It's like, when I first got into all this and decided to make my first film back in 2007, I still now in 2011 have never got to make the film that I initially wanted to make when I started getting into all this, because I started making my first film and it was going to be about secret societies. I was really wanting to make a film that was going to be the end all be all. And I still want to make that film eventually on the secret societies and everything about them. And then I noticed I had all this stuff on 9/11, and there was a lot of 9/11 films out there that didn't have stuff in it that I thought should be in there. So I did that instead. And then within a month of releasing that film, I started my radio show in 2007. And within 3 days of starting the radio show, I found out about the Council for National Policy. So ever since then, I've been on that. And it's interesting, Lee, because I never thought that the CMP information, all this stuff would take me right back where I began. And lo and behold, it did, because now I understand why for years we were programmed with all of this stuff about, the Freemasons or Satan worshiping, blood drinking, devil worshipers. But yet, it was like the Vatican and everybody else were just clean as a whistle. You never heard anything. And then I started going, well, how come I don't find anything in any of the Freemasons' writings that says this is for evil and devil worship and the rest of this stuff? Because it doesn't say it anywhere. It simply is information, and whoever's hands that it falls into is who controls it. I've been reading on my show over the past week. I've been reading William Bramley's book, The Gods of Eden, and people can go listen to my archives on my show. I highly suggest people go back and listen to all the shows where I've been reading this, because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about with this ties into that, and I reference a lot of that on the show. So people can go to my website, theglobalreality.com. It's www.theglobalreality.com and check that out. And that's one of the things that it talked about, Lee, are these various things where people think it's this explanation or it's that explanation or anything else, but we're being told that it's the Freemasons and you always see Dr. Stan Monteith. So Freemasons are satanic, devil worshipping blood drinkers.
Oh yeah,
and then you
find
CMP
out member, yeah,
and then you find out the Jesuit and the Jesuit oath and the Knights of Malta oath are almost one and the same. They're very similar, but in both of those oaths they swear to blood oath to kill all Protestants and Freemasons on the planet. And when you start to understand that, then you go, oh, this is why. This is why after the Alumbrado Society was formed in Spain, you have the rise of the of what became from the Alumbrado Society, what became the Illuminati as we know, with Adam Weishaupt, the Jesuit agent. He goes in, infiltrates all the Masonic lodges, absorbs Freemasonry into the Vatican, and then it's repackaged, re-put out, and then they put out the cover story that, oh, yes, the Freemasons, they're this ancient secretive order, and yes, they're evil, and they run the planet. It's the exact same model to a T that they ran with the protocols of the elders of Zion. That way, when anybody gets too close to the plan, they always think it's Jews, and they don't look any farther back than that. And this game has been ran effectively by what is referred to in William Bramley's book as the Custodians and this custodial society. And it's very fascinating information in the book that he talks about, and really goes a long way towards explaining the creation of the priest class, how they got their knowledge, and how they were able to set up societies that are based on keeping mankind in ignorance of who they are and what our potential is. It's unbelievable. Everything is designed, Lee, to keep us from finding out the truth about what we are. There is something about us in our lineage and where we come from that it seems to be a massive threat to the custodians, to the creators, to the elite. And that's why trillions and trillions of dollars are pumped into the conditioning. That's why trillions of dollars are pumped into the control grid, into surveillance, into brainwashing, into all of this. Because something about human beings, unfiltered, untouched, realizing their potential seems to be the silver bullet that will bring down the New World Order. And so everything is designed about keeping us in spiritual bondage and spiritual ignorance so that we never find out who we truly are. And that is exactly what the CMP and the phony patriots and Alex Jones and this whole thing are doing. They are playing right into the hands of the elite and keeping us from ever obtaining anything, because they're keeping people stuck in paradigms, whether it be Christian paradigm or the Constitution paradigm or any of these other paradigms. All of these things are designed to keep people from evolving into what mankind could truly be, and that is the goal.
Well, yeah, the book that you mentioned, it sounded very interesting. I heard some of your broadcasts when you're reading from it, and when you refer to the custodians, just so the audience understands, you're basically referring to extraterrestrials. Am I correct in that?
Well, that can be. I like to generally leave that up to the listeners to decide, but it's basically the custodians are what people would consider the gods or extraterrestrials or the Anunnaki or the people who created life. Any of that, any of those nomenclatures, any of those terms would be effective. Yes. But what's interesting is that there's actually a group, and one of my listeners had sent me this after I was talking about this is amazing. I'll send this to you in your box, Lee. It's, or I'll just give you the website here. It's globalcustodian.com. And somebody sent this, you're talking about this custodial societies. Well, take a look at this website, globalcustodian.com. It's very interesting because they have a GNC logo for Global Custodian, which when you look at it from the sideways is essentially a sigil. You've got this pyramid eye thing at the top, and Global Custodian talks about how they're this group that basically works in the tip top of the financial world. And I thought, wow, that's a heck of a coincidence, don't you think?
That's very odd. No question about that. I'll definitely have to take a look at that link.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it says they're focused distribution vehicles for advertisers, sponsors, and for the editorial content of basically where'd it go? Securities processing operations, everything in the financial world. It's just unbelievable that we have this group that's involved at the highest levels. Involved in the monetary system. They just happen to have, Global Custodian in their name. And we think, well, my goodness, the bloodlines of the custodians were the ones that set up the banks. It's just fascinating, man. We start to see more and more data every day that appears that the power players and the elite and the people that are running the show and running the think tanks and the groups and running the priest classes and all this stuff goes back, way back, to the very beginning of time on this planet, and there's definitely a lot of evidence that points in the direction that what the elite are doing now in this day and age is a continuation of that, and also an ability for them to be able to challenge these custodians and become the new custodians. And it's scary stuff indeed. Yeah,
and it goes back to the premise that these people are seeking to become gods themselves, and that's a fairly well-documented fact when you look at the transhumanist agenda and you see where everything is going. And there's a very good possibility that over the next 50 to 60 to 70 years that we could see the possibility of a lot of this life extension technology becoming available to these elites, if not already, and them being able to literally become immortal. I mean, we are getting to that point in time where these things will happen. But, I think the whole priest class agenda, clearly, especially from the things that you were talking about, is designed to put us in spiritual bondage. They do not want us to achieve any sort of spiritual enlightenment. And that's why we have all these phony religions that are put out there as a means to keep people in this box. It's like everything is designed to put us in a box, whether it's religion, whether it's the money system, whether it's pretty much anything you can think of. And religion, I think, is one of the aspects of this control system that doesn't get talked about enough. And that really is the essence of what this priest class is. And it's these people that, again, have used religion as a mechanism to control people. And that's why all these preachers and these people like Reverend Graham and Tim LaHaye and these other characters, that's why I'm so fascinated in exploring and studying what these people are all about. And I think all of this really answers the questions as to why people in these Christian-based patriot movements and these radio shows, why all these people that are associated with these things, why they don't talk about these various Christian-based institutions, the Vatican, and so forth and so on, because it proves that everything that they stand for is based off of a lie. It's really incredible.
Oh, it is, and that's what he definitely gets into a lot of that in the book, William Bramley's Gods of Eden, and my reading I've been doing of that on my show the past couple of weeks is it's been great, and it's been very enjoyable for me because, having never read the book before, even though coincidentally some of the things that I've read on my show that have been printed on websites I've read ended up coming from that book, which was great, but having never read the book in its entirety, reading it on air has given me the ability to be able to point out a lot of this stuff. And it's definitely more entailed if people go back and listen to those shows. So I suggest they do that. But it's all there, Lee. I mean, I'm seeing it more and more every day after reading this book. I mean, I was already pretty much convinced of this. But there's just no doubt that the people who founded society, set up religions, set up secret societies, and set up these things to keep mankind in ignorance about themselves and what our potential is, are the same people, the progeny. Their progeny are the people today running the think tanks, running the multinational corporations, running the military-industrial complex, running the banks, running religions, and it's just a more evolved version of the same thing that people in ancient Samaria were experiencing or people in ancient Babylon were experiencing. And until we can show people that the same people running the show 5,000 years ago are the same people running the show today, and it's just a continuation of that, and I think we are getting more and more pieces of evidence every day to make that more crystal clear for people. I think that once people see that, it's going to be very difficult for the system as it has stood to continue. But as you know as well as I do, Lee, I mean, I just think anybody that thinks that they know what's going to happen a month from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, we can all guess. But I'd say you got to be out of your mind if you think you know exactly what's going to happen, because this thing is a total crapshoot. I don't even think the people in charge anymore know what's going to happen when it's going to happen. They're just rolling dice. And when something hits, what do? They just use their mechanisms. They use their control force to come in and then make it, by design, serve the system and to continue the New World Order and everything else, as we mentioned earlier. So, again, it's the same old thing. If they don't cause something to happen, Bubba, they sure as heck go in there and find a way to make it work for them. That's undeniable.
Sure, and I think it's important to understand that although these people are very powerful, they have money, they have different institutions that, of course, exert power over people. I mean, there's no question that they have these things, but they're not gods. These people are not all powerful where they can just push a button and then all of a sudden X, Y, and Z happens. And there seems to be this mindset that these people have this power, and that's completely false. These people, again, they're not gods. They think that they are gods, but they're really not. And that's one of their weaknesses because they're so arrogant. And I think a lot of what's happening now is that we're seeing their arrogance out in the open. I mean, you look back at this situation with Libya, and you take a look at how they pull off this event on March 19th, 8 years to the day of the invasion of Iraq. And it turns out that March 19th, if you look back in ancient Rome, well, that was the day that began the celebration of the festival that was dedicated to Minerva. Plus, this is also the time where you have the spring equinox, and on top of that, you also have the supermoon that took place. So you have all these different things that correlate with one another, and you see how they pull off this event on this particular date, and they're doing this all out in the open. And with the advent of the internet and information being able to travel faster and faster than ever before, it's a lot easier to make these correlations and understand fully what they're doing. But Josh, just real quick, I just want to go back to the book. And I was listening to one of your broadcasts, and you brought up something very interesting that I believe came from the author. And that was this notion, and this was described very well. And I haven't heard it described this way, but I think it was very accurate. And the author described the relationship between the priest class and the gods, essentially as the priest class being intermediaries to the gods, between the human race and the gods. They were basically the go-between. And I thought that was a very interesting way to put the relationship between the priest class and the gods. I've never heard it described that way before. I was hoping to get your comments on that.
Oh, absolutely. And that was a very accurate way of putting it, where, as you said, the intermediaries, to where, and here's where it gets fuzzy. And I think this is a very intriguing point to zero in on, Lee, because it's one of those points where we just don't know for sure. And it brings up a question, and I'd like to, sort of present to the audience tonight, so maybe that they can think about this on their own time and come to their own conclusions on this, because we just don't know for a fact, Lee, whether or not when this knowledge was passed to the priests, to the people that became the intermediaries between mankind, was it that they were instructed and told not to give this to mankind, which is, I think, what most people believe was the case. Most people believe that the custodians instructed the priests to keep this to themselves or whatever have you, but we just don't have the information enough to know. I personally am now starting to think more and more, based on the evidence, that it could be at least a possibility that what happened is that the intermediaries were, when they were given this knowledge, realize the power of the knowledge and realize that, my goodness, if we didn't share this with everybody and didn't create a world where everybody would be equal, because that's really what the information is. It's the great equalizer. It's the one thing that makes every single man, woman, and child on this planet alive at whatever time they're alive 100% equals. It makes there be no power structure. It makes there be no hierarchy, no want or anything else. And you have to think that, because if it's true what the Sumerian texts say, because we were so much like the creators, and these were not people that were enslaved. They weren't, princes. They were princes. They weren't slaves and minors and everything else. So that's why we have always had the rebellious spirit to not be enslaved. So I'm leaning more and more every day, Lee, towards these priests, really realizing this knowledge and understanding that this is something that humans would never have had access to otherwise. I think they realized that you could gain a whole lot of power, a whole lot of influence, and basically run the planet by, instead of telling humans this information, keeping it in secret and only passing it through the people that go through the priesthood. And that is indeed what has happened. So to me, it's a big point of contention now, where I know for the longest time people just assumed that, okay, but how did the people that were deemed the priests and the intermediaries, how did they become the ones that were in the intermediaries? How were they picked? How were they ones that were decided they would be the intermediaries instead of this group over here? Well, that's answered by the fact that the genetic manipulation that was going on was being done subsequently. More and more and more of their DNA was being used. And by the time they got to the Caucasus Mountains region and used the white-skinned people found there and put them in positions of power, they were the ones. It goes back to what was spawned the Levites, the white priests. Those were the ones that were the intermediaries that were put in charge and handed this knowledge. And I think they were also the ones that ultimately made the decision to keep this information in secret, to keep mankind in ignorance so they could use it as a form of control. That, to me, wraps up the entire system right there, Lee.
Well, it's certainly very fascinating, and we see the continuation of the whole system being played out today. There's absolutely no question about that. And it doesn't matter if you look at the Vatican or if you look at any of these other denominations of Christianity. These are false religious systems that are put in place to ensure that you do not explore your own spirituality. And that's, I think, an important point to make, is that, and like you said, Josh, I mean, every single human being on this planet is an equal. There shouldn't be any hierarchy where one person is over somebody, or another person is in a position of power over somebody else. And that to me seems as if that's really something that needs to be put out on a grand scale. And unfortunately, we have these people who are in control that, they don't want a world like that. And so what I hope, and since we're getting closer and closer to the point where information is just traveling at instantaneous speed, that people are going to start to understand these things much more because of the fact that, like I said, information travels faster. So it isn't like back in the 70s or 80s where you had to go to libraries and it was painstaking to find all this information and put it together. It's much easier, much faster to correlate all this data, put it together, and understand fully what's going on, just because of the fact that everything is becoming faster and more easy to access. But
I think the ancients knew about that. I think when the ancients talked about the age of revealing, I think that they had some kind of knowledge, even beyond probably what they knew, that told them that this age was going to come, and it was going to come through technology. And I think that the genie's out of the bottle now, Lee. And I think that I just more and more every day just lean on the fact that if we fail, and if humankind loses to these clowns, it's going to be hard to put the blame on anybody else but us at this point. You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree. Absolutely. I mean, the information is out there.
It's there. Yeah, it's there.
It's right there. It's there. And the fact of the matter is that really the only thing that's preventing us from this mass awakening is the fact that we still have a large segment of the population that buys into mainstream consensus reality, and they are obsessed with things that have absolutely no significance, material things. Yep. With breads and circuses. I mean, you got friggin' Barack Obama filling out NCAA March Madness brackets while wars breaking out in the Middle East and the economy is going to hell. It's completely insane. It's the equivalent of Nero fiddling while Rome burned. And I think that's an accurate analogy to make in this current situation that we see right now in the United States. But Josh, we've been going at this for about an hour straight. And I need to get a drink of water. I don't know about you, but
yeah,
I'm pretty gassed right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side of the I'm going to play some music. On the other side of that, I want to get into the rock wall. I know you've been digging into the subject of the rock wall a little bit further, and you live right in that area. So yeah. I definitely want to dig into that subject, and also I want to get into the New Madrid fault line and some of the information surrounding that. You got this national level exercise that's about to take place there. And of course, you had that drilling that was going on and the earthquake. I mean, there's a lot of very fascinating stuff happening with that. So I definitely want to cover that as well. So, folks, what we'll do is we're going to take a quick break. I don't know, Josh, how about 5 minutes? Does that sound good?
Yeah, it's good. 5-6 minutes, whatever.
Okay, 5 minutes. All right. So what we'll do is we're going to play some music for 5 minutes. And then on the other side of that 5 minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We are here for 3 hours commercial-free tonight with my guest, Josh Reeves. You can check out his website at theglobalreality.com, and we're talking about a number of different topics, a number of different things pertaining to current events, information, news, lots of stuff to get into on tonight's show. And, well, we covered a lot in the first hour, that's for sure, but we have a lot more to cover. And the next topic that I want to get into is the subject of this rock wall. And I've mentioned this a few times on my show, but Josh, I think you know a lot more about this, seeing as though you've done a great deal of research into it. The rock wall is actually in your area where you live, which I think is, of course, another reason why you're so knowledgeable about this. But what I find really fascinating about this is that this is not something that I've really heard a whole lot of information about from a whole lot of our people. And we know this exists. There's this very unusual rock formation that exists in this town called Rockwell, of all names they decided to name it. They named it Rockwell. And there's a lot of unusual things about it. So I'd like you to give the audience a brief description of what the Rockwell is, why this is an important archaeological site, at least in my estimation, and how it ties into, of course, the Masonic Lodge that's there. There's this congressman that's involved. And there's a lot of very interesting information pertaining to the town of Rockwell and the Rockwell itself. So if I give you the floor, if you could just run with this, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. It's something that I've been fascinated in for about 7 or 8 years now. I first found out about it by reading Jim Marr's book, actually, which was an interesting way to find out about that. I was reading his book, Rule by Secrecy, and it's one of my favorite all time books. I think it's just a great primer for people that want a little bit of everything. That book always had a little bit of everything for the type of information. It really covered everything from kind of stuff we're talking about tonight, from geopolitics to secret societies, to Sumerian stuff, all kinds of that, just every bit of information. And in the end of one of his chapters in that book, he says, something to the effect of, maybe one day, if research continues, many things that we have questions about will be answered. And he names this list. And at the end of it, he says, the mysterious rock wall in Rockwall, Texas. And I immediately always perked up to that because I grew up about, 10, 15 minutes away from Rockwall, a little small rural area. And growing up, all of my friends, and myself included, and my friends' parents and grandparents, everybody that kind of grew up in this area always had, stories of strange descriptions of UFOs and missing time over the area of where the rock wall is located on the bridge there. In fact, myself and a friend of mine experienced that. We crossed the bridge at I think noon or 1 o'clock, and when we got to the other side, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were supposed to be we had left to be at work at 1. We'd left at noon. It was an hour drive, and when we got there, it was 5 o'clock, and we couldn't figure out how. We called home, and they said, "Yeah, you left at noon. Are you on drugs? You're out of your mind." And then we started hearing other stories of this. And so for years, a lot of myself and people I know had strange experiences at this lake and strange experiences around the area. And then I found out about this mysterious rock wall, and I started digging into that. And then after I started my radio show, I had met some other people, including Delphi, who plays in the band, the Demigods, with me. And when I first met her, I had told her about it. And her parents kind of live out not too far from there. So we started doing some digging and had an opportunity to meet the gentleman, John Lindsay, who was involved with the original the dig that happened back in 1999. The people always ask me, they're like, well, I want to go out and I want to see this thing. Well, you can't just go out and see the thing because it's buried 50 feet under the ground. It's underground all the way down to the bedrock to get to this thing. And every time that anybody does any digging on it, people start to get really, really concerned. And anytime you start digging in on this stuff and getting closer to it, people start getting more and more concerned. And so after a couple of years of kind of inactivity and not really looking at it, recently I started deciding I wanted to get back into it and possibly maybe making my next film on this subject as well. Because I had some people a couple of years ago, back when I was doing my show here on Oracle Broadcasting, that had expressed an interest in maybe putting up some money and getting a dig done, and they wanted you involved and myself involved and stuff like that. And if those people are out there and maybe want to do that again, they can contact me at my website at globalrealityshow@gmail.com. They can send me an email address. But what's interesting about it is that you have this formation, which the scientific community tries to claim up and down the wall is a natural formation. They try to say it's a natural sandstone dike formation. If people want to see what it looks like, they can go to YouTube and they can type in the rock wall, 3 words, the rock wall, then Rockwall, Texas. And the first video that comes up, I believe, is the video there. That's from the original dig. And people can see what it looks like. And we had one of our listeners, I think it's a listener of your show and my show, contact me a couple of weeks ago, Lee, and say that their mother is a professional archaeologist and didn't know anything about the rock wall. And he had his mother look at the pictures, and she said, well, undoubtedly that's a man-made subject, and that's a man-made object. And yet everybody in the scientific community continues to maintain that it's natural. Now, what's interesting about them saying that it's a natural formation is this. They try to say that, yeah, it's a natural sandstone formation, but it's the only one like it we've ever discovered on Earth.
Well, that's quite the amazing coincidence right there. That wow.
I mean, that's their scientific explanation is, yes, it's natural. No, it's not man-made, but we've never seen another one like it anywhere on Earth. Because the real kicker about the whole thing is the analysis that's been done on it by John Lindsay and other college universities is they found that the crystals that comprise the rocks are what is referred to as a geopolymer. You have 3 different types of crystals brought from 3 different sources that don't exist around the area in Rockwall, Texas, here in Central Texas, right on the 33rd parallel, right on the friggin' Trinity River, that runs right through Dealey Plaza. I mean, it's unbelievable, Lee.
Well, I'm sure there's nothing to that. I'm sure
there's nothing to
we're
that.
imagining all this.
Yeah, it's all an accident. It's all an accident. And the fact of the matter is, these three polymers, these three crystals, are brought together, put together, and mixed in a compound that comprises the rocks that make up this wall. Now, that can't happen accidentally. That can't happen on its own. There's just no way. And so some of the evidence, I mean, they found things like, skeletons of giants around the area where this thing is located. They found, shark's teeth embedded into the thing. They found fresh sand dollars down at the bottom. They even got so far down, they got all the way down to where the pre-flood ash is located. There's a layer of ash below, right when you get down to the shale, where the whole earth was scorched to ash at one time. And of course, that's talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu text that describes these wars between space aliens. It's mind blowing to me to know that when you dig down that far, Lee, the evidence to backing up this text written thousands of years ago is right there on the ground. And I think that there are many things that are right under the ground underneath us. I mean, the people's estimates on this thing are saying between 350 and 500,000 years old. Anytime there's a dig, anytime anybody wants to do anything towards it, it's shut down. You've got a 20-mile long perimeter of this wall that has perimeters inside of it. And just coincidentally, on major places where they found these dome chamber rooms, it just so happens that that's where they put the courthouse. It just so happens that Congressman Ralph Hall, who is the congressman there in Rockwall, who seems to get everybody shut down anytime they want to do anything, thinking, oh, well, no, it's natural. It's natural. No, we're not going to let you be approved to have any digs or anything else. Oh, yeah. Just so happens Ralph Hall, who, by the way, is a Council for National Policy member, just so happens his office is located where? Smack dab in the middle, right on top of one of the rock-lined rooms of the rock wall. 33rd degree Freemason. He's a part of a lodge there in Rockwall called the East Fork Lodge. And at the top of their website, they actually have a rock representation in a little animation at the top of the website of the rock wall. And that's what it is. It's a masonry wall. And it's just mind-blowing to me that they found a wheel embedded inside of the wall. I've held it in my hand, and this wheel was comprised of a composite of titanium, iron, tin, aluminum. It was smelted together.
So that's not a natural formation, I take it.
Well, they don't. No. They won't. They won't even touch it. Now now check this out. There was a gentleman who was doing something called a paleomagnetic survey, and people that have seen the Jurassic Park films, Lee, I know you've seen all those films. And
yes.
There's a part at the beginning. I think it's the first one where they're doing like they're doing a paleomagnetic survey. And you can see on the screen, they're seeing everything that's under the ground. They can see what's in all these caverns and everything else. Well, when they had a guy come and do that on the wall, the guy that did the paleomagnetic survey freaked out so bad that he will not publish his findings about what he found there until after he's dead.
Well, that's fascinating right there.
There was some sort of reading in the paleomagnetic, something in the magnetics of this place that scared the crap out of this guy, a hardened scientist, to the point where he has put it in his will. He will not publish his findings until after he is dead. And they really found a lot of anomalies, magnetic anomalies around this thing. Very, very strange. In fact, John Lindsay had told us a story about when they were doing the dig and they excavated down, that they took the Caterpillar, the tractor, back up to the top of this thing and parked it on top of the edge of the wall. And when they did, it started shaking and vibrating like it was going to take off in midair. And they noticed that the rock seemed to have a very, very what they describe as piezoelectrical properties to it, meaning that the rocks themselves can produce an energy field that can be harnessed and used for a specific purpose. And so more and more, my theory about what this thing is, I've come across looking at some of the older information. It appears to me, because of some of the usages of this wall inside of it, you had people hiding out like they were hiding from something. With the giant skeletons being found around there, it leads one to believe, considering that area is at the perfect trajectory for entry into space. The area around where the rock wall is located, around Lake Ray Hubbard, is located in the same position that Cape Canaveral is located. So when we have this 20-mile radius wall, giant skeletons, obviously using people of the indigenous cultures to help them create it, much in the same way we've heard in other stories, you start to get the idea that this was possibly some sort of launching pad for marooned extraterrestrials thousands of years ago, who then were believed to be gods by the locals, who then became the Caddo Indians years and years later.
Yeah, Josh, just to stop you real quick, you said Cape Canaveral. That's in Florida, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So are you referring to like these ley lines? Is that kind of what you're getting into? Where I'm not sure if it's the same thing, but
it's not ley lines. It's supposedly there's a trajectory for entry into space. That's why they can only launch entry vehicles into space from certain locations.
Okay, I follow. All right. I just wanted to be 100% clear. I wasn't 100% where you're going with this. But yeah, please continue. Yeah,
there's something, there are certain points around that's why there aren't launching pads. That's why they don't just put a launching pad in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or anything else. There's something about entry into space, and I don't know all the logistics of it off the top of my head, but there's something about certain areas are actually more efficient or something else, or more aligned for an easy passageway into space from the ground to the sky. That's what I'm talking about.
Right, that makes sense, because clearly there's going to be places where you can launch a craft up into the atmosphere, and of course that requires a great deal of force and power to launch something so it can get up there into orbit. So,
but continuing on here, yes. What's interesting is back in the 1940s they pulled out two gigantic, these were like 2.5, 3.5 ton stones that came from underneath the wall, and they had an ancient language on them. That has only been found in places in southern Mexico and Mesopotamian cultures. Now, what's very interesting is that these rocks came up. One of them, they both came up missing. One of them disappeared, and the other one was in the basement of the old Rockwall Courthouse, where it is sitting on top of this giant domed rock room that relates to the rock wall. Well, in the middle of the night, someone stole this 2.5 ton rock out of the basement, and come to find out the person who had stolen this, and it exists in their home to this day, is Congressman Ralph Hall. And when John Lindsay, the architect who had done the rock wall dig, started finding out about this, he started asking questions, starting saying, hey, you know, what's going on with this? Why in the hell does Congressman Ralph Hall have this thing in his house? And why can't we see it? Why can't we analyze everything else? And they told him to shut up. The Rockwall Historical Foundation shut down all of the research they were doing into the rock wall. They shut it down completely. And this Freemason CMP member is sitting in Rockwall, Texas right now with an ancient stone with a writing on it that could prove that what the Mesoamericans refer to as the mythical kingdom of Aslan or Atlantis is smack dab in the middle of right here where I'm sitting in North Texas. And there are a lot of pieces of evidence that point in that direction. And that's what I'm leaning more and more to as it being, because there was a person who had gotten a channeling from a channeler named Ashiana Dean. And in this channeling session, she had told this person that the rock wall was an ancient storehouse for technology, ancient alien technology after the fall of Atlantis. Now, whether you believe that or not, here are some things that might persuade you more and more. One of the main rooms of this rock wall, right smack dab on top of it, British Aerospace Division L3 built their brand new facility right on the corner of one of these massive underground temple rooms, Lee. So I'm going.
Well, that's interesting. Almost as if they set that up so they can experiment with certain technologies.
Absolutely, or maybe they're able to bring some things out from under the ground, above ground, and do it in secret by building these buildings around it. I mean, there's a major church on one of them, Lee. They've got. I mean, there's a strip between the Highway 66 bridge and the I-30 bridge where the bridge goes over Lake Ray Hubbard, where that begins, and that is the epicenter that we have found for where there are cavern rooms and everything else. And Lee, along that line, and it's about maybe, I don't know, a 4 or 5 mile stretch. Along that line, along that hot spot, the homes along there are multi-million-dollar homes. We're talking about $300, $400, $500 million homes I have never seen outside of stuff you would see in the Hollywood Hills. in Texas. And number one, Rockwall is the richest county in the state of Texas. There is something about the properties of this rock that the elite have zeroed in on, and now they've built all these houses there. And it's funny because Alex Jones, one of our listeners, actually sent me an email here while we were talking about this and saying, that they'd heard Alex Jones say he lived in Rockwall for a while. And I've heard him talk about, I lived in the gated community. Well, those gated communities happen to be right there in that area, right along where the rock wall is. So
that's true. And actually, Josh, they mentioned that in the Rolling Stone magazine article they did on him.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
So my thing is here, Lee, when you have a connection to the guy trying to keep this covered up, Ralph Hall being in the CMP and being a Freemason, and then Jones living along that, I think this is a part of the massive cover up by the priest class. And in fact, John Lindsay, the architect who did this dig, right as they started to find out some very interesting things that were starting to bring up questions, like the fact of how old this thing might be, between 250 and 500,000 years old. And, the fact that they tell us people didn't exist back then. Right when he started to do that, he was visited by two people in black suits that he described as church people. I think that pretty much says it all. And
church people, like what, Jesuits or
we're all in the high up. I don't know, but something like that.
Yeah, Vatican reps. Yeah,
that's what we assume. That's what we're assuming it is. But they told him that he was to let it go and not look into it anymore. And then the next day, he had all his funding cut. So I'm just putting it out there. This could be the this could be the thing that really breaks open the paradigms and brings down the belief systems that the elite have set up. Because again, they certainly don't want it to get out that this is, this town where the richest county in all of the entire state of Texas is located and all these elite people live, might be sitting smack dab on top of the ancient city of Aslan. And what's interesting there is it said that Aslan was built by a character named Quetzalcoatl. Now,
the feathered serpent, yes,
is the feathered serpent. He's basically the Mexican Jesus. I mean, people laugh when you say that because it sounds like a funny term, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and just I hate to interrupt you, but there have been stories of many crucified saviors over human history. It isn't just Jesus and that whole story. He's just one of the latest iterations of the same story that we see replicated throughout human history. But please continue.
No, it's absolutely true. And we have these stories of Quetzalcoatl, and Quetzalcoatl being the one that, the feathered serpent. And again, as you said, the same messianic stories. And it said that Quetzalcoatl is the person who built the mythical kingdom of Aslan. And there are depictions of Aslan that depict these various interlocking rooms that connect to one massive structure. And I said, well, wow, isn't that coincidental? Because that's what we've discovered, and that's what the people who have done the digs and everything and done the paleomagnetic surveys on the rock wall have found, is that it is a wall, but the wall within it is a structure housing these many different rooms. And that's what some of the depictions of that. So I said, wow, that's two things. Quetzalcoatl supposedly built that. And then in a little town of Royce City, which is not very far from where I grew up, it's right outside of Rockwall. One of the gentlemen who was interested in doing digs on this stuff had found out in a field where they thought they had located some stuff that was very close to the wall. They found this little clay. They didn't really know what it was. It was some kind of a stone, but they couldn't tell if it was an artifact or it was a rock. And the guy who found it was convinced that it had something to do with Quetzalcoatl. He was just convinced of that. And so people were arguing, trying to say this artifact was a rock. Well, John Lindsay took it and had it x-rayed. And when they x-rayed it, they said it was not a rock, it was not a fossil, and it was an artifact. And they found out that it was related to a tribe, Mesoamerican tribe in South America that related to the Aztecs and the ancient Mesopotamians, or not Mesopotamians, but Mesoamericans. And John Lindsay took a trip down there, and when he took a trip down to Mexico, this tribe knew he was coming. They expected him. They had a prophecy already that he was going to show up with this rock. And when he showed up with his artifact, they were going to instruct him on how they could have a new one made. And then that way he could take it back and take it back to America and tell people what's going on in Rockwall. And they did do that. And this depiction of this thing, it's very interesting. It's kind of like a goat alien head thing with antennas. And that's what the ancient people gave him when they recreated it, and they said that it was Quetzalcoatl. So we have this artifact. We have this writing that relates to the same cultures. We have also the fact, here's one more tidbit for you about Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl was said to have been an expert at two things: crystals and alchemy, metal. Now, wow, two examples there: crystals, crystal making, the geopolymers put in the rocks to make the stones, and of course the different iron things they found that have been smelted together. That's a pretty hell of a coincidence, Lee, that the evidence points in the direction. I just can't deny it anymore. I think that what is under Rock Wall is the ancient mythical kingdom of Aslan. It's some ancient Custodian society, and the revelation of it would bring down the foundations of religion. It would bring down the foundations of science, and there's just no telling what would unleash from this. It would probably bring down the whole power structure. I think that's why they're so scared of it. But I want to get back into it, and I definitely want to try to find a way to fund a new dig. I mean, it's probably going to cost anywhere from a couple $100,000 up to $500,000. I don't know. You have to have diggers, and you have to have a piece of land to do it at. You have to have archaeologists and pumps and all this stuff. But I think it's something that we definitely should try our damnedest to find out about, because it could be something that the elite would not be able to back down from if the genie was out of the bottle.
It sounds like a really fascinating subject, and that's why I wanted you to talk about it at great length, because you know a lot about the whole situation down there, and clearly there's a lot of questions here. A lot of questions. None of them have been answered, at least to my satisfaction. And it sounds like this congressman, what's his name, Ralph Hall? Is that the guy's name that you said? It sounds like this guy is almost like a gatekeeper for this whole thing. And how old is this Ralph Hall? I mean, he must be getting up there.
Yeah, he's old as the hills, man. He's like 82, but he doesn't seem like he's slowing down anytime soon.
Oh, I wonder if it's the alien technology he got. I don't know. I'm joking, of course. And I don't know if that's 100% true, but
look, let me add something else here, Lee, and this will add a little bit something else to it. And I don't know if it proves anything else further on the rock wall or not, but let's throw it out there just because you said that. This is one story that I have heard. I've read this on the internet. I've heard this from other people who have researched the rock wall. I don't know if this is 100% verifiable or not. I'm just putting it out there as a possibility. Originally, well, I know this for a fact. Originally, when the Rock Wall Lake Ray Hubbard was built, it wasn't initially supposed to be really a lake. It was basically a trench. And when they were digging it out, that's when they started hitting these pockets of these underground caverns, and they were having caterpillars fall down into them underground. There's supposedly there are places in this lake, and it's a man-made lake. It's not natural. There's supposedly there are places in this lake that are in upwards of, what they admit to is 40 feet. And it may be as possibly as much as 50, 60, on up to 90 feet down under the ground. My dad's told me stories about going out there on the lake before and trying to drop anchor on the boat and not being able to hit bottom. Like, wow, literally that's crazy. Not hitting bottom. And so, that's definitely one of the things that leans towards the fact that they built the lake to cover up what they found when they were digging this trench. And allegedly, when Kennedy came to Dallas in 63, he came into Fort Worth first. He came into Fort Worth. He had a meeting that morning and then came to Dallas, of course, for the parade, and the rest is history. But supposedly, he was going to, at the end, he told everybody in Fort Worth that at the end of the parade, when they got to the International Trade Mart, allegedly Kennedy was going to hold a press conference and reveal to the people of the world that they had found evidence of an ancient alien society in the Dallas area. And this was the explanation as to why he was really in Dallas that day and why he was there. And what's interesting is that they didn't know what they were going to do right up until the time he was assassinated. It was touch and goes what they were going to do with the Lake Ray Hubbard area. And by within 2 to 3 months after Kennedy was assassinated, I think it was March of 64, they had the lake finished, had water filled into it and everything else, and had moved on and did it in 3 times the time it was supposed to take them. They rushed, got it done, filled it up with water, didn't even allow the private contractors to get their caterpillars that fell down into these caverns out. They made them leave it so they could fill it up with water, Lee. They were trying to cover their tracks for something. And with everything we know about, Congressman Ralph Hall, his connections to that, his connections to the CMP, again, connections to the people that the Hunts and the people that were involved in the Kennedy assassination, the John Birch Society, the Jesuit Order, the priest class. I can't help but see a very, very interesting connection here.
There's absolutely something strange about this whole situation. And the fact that they would put a man-made lake in this area, to me, reeks of a cover-up of some sort, especially if they left all these backhoes and this heavy, expensive equipment down there. That, to me, it sounds as if that there's definitely something there, and there needs to be some sort of archaeological dig to find out exactly what is in these caverns. But it sounds almost as if that the elite have really zeroed in on this place, as you said, Josh, and they're not going to allow anybody to get close to finding out the truth about what's going on here. And but what you said about JFK, I found to be very interesting, because I remember seeing this X-Files episode in which before the assassination, they provide him with proof of the existence of extraterrestrials. And that was kind of a subplot as to why JFK got assassinated. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I'll tell you another correlation. Well, oh my goodness! Thanks for pointing that out, Lee. Oh man, wow.
Okay. Something in your mind, or
well, yeah, I got one for you. How about this? This really blows me away. Okay, at the beginning of the X-Files movie, the first one, Fight the Future, the whole beginning of that film, probably I think the first, 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I mean, the first part of that film takes place where? It takes place in Dallas.
Is that when they had the bomb that they're trying to I forget what they're trying to do. They're trying to defuse it.
Right. But before that, at the beginning of the film, it says, it scrolls across the screen. It says North Texas, which is the year I live in. It says North Texas, 350,000 years ago. And you see these cavemen go into this cave, and it's underground, and there's an alien in there. And when they kill the alien, the black oil stuff comes out of the alien, and it goes into the to the caveman, and basically turns the caveman into an alien human hybrid. And of course, that's where they say where humans came from after that. And then they fast forward and they show North Texas in the modern day, and it's actually not North Texas because they show the desert, and we're not in the desert here. But
right.
What's very interesting is these kids fall down in this hole, and they're playing, and they find these skeletons down in there, and one of the alien gets in one of the firemen and the little kid, and they seal it up and everything. And that's where the building thing you're talking about comes in Dallas. But when they pan up and they show the Dallas skyline, you can see the Dallas skyline in the distance. What's very interesting about it was to me when I first saw that movie, and another interesting tidbit, when that movie premiered, when it came out, when I saw it, I guess in 98 or 99, I saw it in Rockwall, Texas, of all things. I know that's funny.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I saw it in the theaters too, Josh. It's been such a long time, and I got to take a look at that film with a fresh set of eyes. Because
when the camera rolls up, you can see the Dallas skyline in the background. And when I was a kid, now that they built up Dallas, when I was a kid, you used to come off of the Lake Ray Hubbard Bridge right where the rock wall is, and you could see the Dallas skyline. The point of view, the vantage point of the Dallas skyline is identical, Lee, in the film as it was when I was a kid, on the exact location where the rock wall is.
That's interesting. Well, we know that the guy behind the X-Files, Chris Carter, 1013 Productions?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy certainly, he's knowledgeable as to what's going on with a lot of this information. I'm sure he's tied in with some of these secretive orders. I would be hard pressed to say otherwise.
Did you ever see the clip where the guy asked him something about asked one of the producers of the X-Files at one of these Comic Cons a few years ago, asked him some questions about 9/11 or 9/11 Truth or something like that, and the guy who was one of the guys, not Chris Carter, one of the other guys on the X-Files team said, "I'm going to refer that question over to Chris." Because he had relationships with, the intelligence community a lot closer than I did.
Yes, so he admits that they both had links to the intelligence community, which, of course, the Lone Gunman, the Lone Gunman TV series, I think, proves that 100%. With the whole 9/11 pilot episode, where they essentially 6 months before the attacks take place, they have an episode that pretty much depicts a lot of what took place 6 months later on September 11, 2001.
It's just undeniable, the things. And that's where the X-Files to me was really it was a great series, but to me it was where they really really solidified the operation that they've had going for a long time. And that is to fictionalize the truth, so the truth seems like fiction, and that's definitely what the X-Files was great at. I bet they bring that show back before it's all over with.
Yes, and what I find it really interesting about the whole thing is, of course, Fox Mulder, the main character in the film, they're always saying, well, we can't kill him, because otherwise, if we kill him, then there's going to be hundreds and thousands of Fox Mulders out there. We won't be able to control them. So, anybody out there who's scared about talking about a lot of this information that we're talking about, I mean, right there in the X-Files, they're admitting that they're not going to take somebody out if they're talking about some really, really dangerous information, at least intentionally, because then you make martyrs out of them. And so, I mean, Josh, we're so far down this road that we've gone that we just have to keep talking about the information and just put it out there. And I think that's the best way to go.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know how people buy into this whole thing where they believe that there's some moniker of safety from keeping your mouth shut and not speaking out about these things. That is suicide. That's what they want. They don't want you to have a voice. They don't want you to be speaking about this with your friends and your families and your neighbors and actually having intelligent conversation and having people, looking at the ins and outs of things and saying, hey, well, look at this piece of information. If this is true, then this could be possible. They don't want that, because then the mechanisms of control that have come through programming and come through religion and public schools and everything else, all of that falls away. And all you're left with is people with facts, people with data, and people with intelligent, rational minds looking at things and looking over it and deciding for themselves what's what, instead of having this intelligentsia tell them what is true and what isn't. And that is one of the most powerful things as a people that we still have, that we can still use, because they want you to keep your mouth shut. They don't want you to say anything. They don't want you to be out there in public, because then you're not an easy mark. Then they can't pull you over and harass you and ask to search your car and all this other stuff without having a little bit of a problem, because you're going to get up in their face and tell them their rights and everything else. That's not what they want. They want quiet slaves that are submissive, that go along, that don't speak out, that don't speak their minds. So if you have been sitting on the fence out there, not wanting to talk about this stuff and not wanting to have a conversation, my goodness, it's time for you to get up off your ass and start talking about this stuff, because it's suicide any other way. If we have everybody talking about this stuff, we can then have a show of force that says to these people, they can't pull this stuff off in broad daylight as easily, because now we're finally paying attention.
Absolutely. There's no reason to live in fear. There's no reason to be scared of these people. Absolutely none. And if you live your life in fear, well, you're not really living. So I encourage anybody out there who's on the fence about this stuff to definitely consider what we're talking about here, and definitely consider participating and lend your voice to what we're talking about here. We need more voices. I think that's really 100% something that we can definitely agree upon. But anyway, Josh, there's some other stuff I want to get into. I do want to get to the New Madrid fault line, but there's another story that I wanted to get your take on, and it kind of ties into the whole rock wall thing. And this whole story seemed very weird to me, because here you have this story that just comes out of nowhere saying that, well, we found Atlantis. All of a sudden, we found Atlantis in Spain, and well, the mystery is solved. And personally, I talked about this on the show. I don't believe this for a second. I think this is just more smoke and mirrors. Apparently, they had some show about this on the National Geographic channel, or one of those channels that covers a lot of this stuff. And what's your take on this? I'm not sure if you saw the story or not, but essentially they're saying that Atlantis was found in Spain, and, well, we can just close the book on Atlantis. And I'm just not buying it.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because it very much ties in with what we were just talking about there with the ancient rock wall. Again, Aslan is the same as Atlantis. Yeah, that's what it is. Aslan, Atlantis, Xibalba. There's various names for it. And yeah, I mean, I did see that article, and I barely even really covered it, because I just kind of said, basically, if you didn't hear me, then Lee, I'll tell you what I said. It was exactly verbatim what you just said. I looked at the article for about 2 seconds and said, well, number one, I knew it was immediate hogwash, but number two, didn't they, I'm going by memory here, and I was when I looked on the show, I swear to you that they rolled that out a few years ago, and that had already been debunked 7 Ways to Sunday for years.
It wouldn't surprise me. I can't remember specifically, but it's like that story about the Noah's Ark that they've regurgitated how many times.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, we see these repeat scenarios over and over and over again. You would have to think that if they were trying to do as we say they are, as we see that they are, and trying to say, oh, well, we're just going to close the books on this Atlantis thing. Boy, that goes a long way to what we were talking about earlier with, and as I've been talking about on my show, the idea of this ancient energy grid that relates to these ancient artifacts activating all over the planet. And this is why they've been launching coup d'etats and civil unrest and all this stuff in Egypt and then in Yemen and all these places where these things are found. And of course, that ancient city that's off the coast of Japan there, that people have, called the Japanese Atlantis, all the rest. It seems that these things may be rising up out of the ground, possibly on a very linear time scale. It could relate to some of the things that these prophecies have talked about for years and years. But I just find it interesting that they're trying to say, oh, well, we can close the books on that. No reason to look into that. Because then later, if somebody comes up with information about Aslan or this thing with the rock wall, that gives them the ability to come back and say, oh, no, it can't be that because we discovered that off the coast of Spain and our intelligentsia already put that out. So the books are closed on that. I find it highly interesting they'd be coming out with that, right on the heels as I had been talking about, all this new information pertaining to the rock wall as well. I think it's a cover story. And the fact of the matter is they are trying to cover something up. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting out all the disinfo they're putting out right now. And it seems that cognitive dissonance is the main thing they're trying to do right now, where they just flood the alternative media with junk and crap. They flood the mainstream media with junk and crap. And then the people that are paying attention are so confused, they don't know what to believe. And when you have people that are using fear to sell products on top of that on some of these shows and these things where it's really only about the monetary gain of the entities that are putting out the information, not about the information itself. I think it becomes very obvious real quickly what's going on here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm really sick of seeing a lot of that stuff where people are putting money and financial gain ahead of information and truth. I mean, look, I do this because I think it's important. This is not something that I do for financial gain. Any money that we get, it's designed to keep this thing going, and that's it. And so if you see anybody that is doing this for financial gain over the truth, they're not doing it for the right reasons, and I think that goes without saying. But Josh, sticking with this same topic, there was another story that came out that I wanted to get your thoughts on, and that's this story about the crystal skulls. Apparently, they found a new crystal skull in Germany that was apparently in the possession of Heinrich Himmler at a certain point in time. I'm not sure if you saw this or not, but...
Yeah, I did, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, very interesting story. What's your take on this whole thing with the crystal skull? Do you think it's real? Do you think... what do you think of it?
Well, I'll tell you this, man. Had it been anybody else except Heinrich Himmler, and what we already know about Heinrich Himmler, he was the master occultist of the Nazis. He was the master. He was the guy that really had initiated Hitler's own quest for the search for the Aryans and the search for the ancient bloodlines, and it very much ties in with the Anunnaki stuff. I mean, this is what Hitler was on the trail of, but he also had done all these massive Black Sun rituals. We're talking about thousands of participants in these rituals. The Black Sun rituals at Vivasburg Castle in Germany, this massive, sprawling place where they did all kinds of blood rituals and deeply occultic type of things that tied into the Golden Dawn and tied into Kabbalism and raising up certain energies and raising certain energies from the sun to be used for negative purposes, all of this stuff. So when I first heard about this and then saw the picture of the skull, it was undeniable to me because there have been a lot of imposters out there through the years of these crystal skulls, but the only one that's ever shown its true merit and its believability has been the Mitchell Hedges skull, which of course is the most famous crystal skull. It's the one that it was carved out of a single rock. It has a hinged jaw. It even has the sutures in the perfect place of the skull where humans have them. And Hewlett-Packard, of course, the world's leading experts on crystals, who did analysis of this in the 1970s, determined that not only was it not done not only was it created with no tools known to mankind, it was also not created in Earth gravity. This was a very mainstream, company, Hewlett Packard, that determined this. And of course, the Himmler skull there that was found had similar characteristics. Allegedly, that's what a lot of this stuff, again, as we've been mentioning with all the operations going on in Yemen and Egypt and on and on and on, many people believe, and again, you don't always have to think that I or me or Lee believe in all the things we talk about here, folks, but, there are people that believe that a lot of that ties into these crystal skulls, and the elite are trying to find these before humanity does, so they can steer the perimeters of the control. What I think is interesting is that the actor Dan Aykroyd, who has been very vocal about his belief in UFOs and extraterrestrials over the past several years, has now produced, and I want to get some of it. It looks awesome. It's called Crystal Skull Vodka, and it comes it's like $70. It comes in a life-size crystal skull full of vodka. And Dan Aykroyd is taking all the proceeds from the sales of this and putting it to fund digs into finding the crystal skulls. And I was thinking about that. I was like, you know what? When we get some more information together on this rock wall deal, maybe we should hit up Aykroyd and let him know about it. Hell,
why not?
He's that excited about everything else, man. He may have some resources he wants to throw in on this. It's one of those things. I think that's awesome, though. I like to see, that's the whole antithesis of somebody like Charlie Sheen. That's somebody putting the money where their mouth is. That's somebody that is trying to, get some truth and get some knowledge and using the money they've made out of Hollywood to do it. I got to admire that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. When you got some joker like Sheen who makes, $2 million an episode?
He's never put anything towards any uncovering of any truth.
He hasn't done anything. Oh, he asked questions about 9/11. That was it. No, that's his big contribution. Give me a break. The guy's a phony, but it sounds like that Dan Aykroyd is really interested in finding out more about these crystal skulls. And I might be wrong on this, Josh. Maybe you can refresh my memory, but didn't he do some show exposing mysteries and things like that at one point?
I can't remember. I can't remember if he did. It's off the top of my head. No, I can't remember if he did. Maybe he did.
I just vaguely remember something. I might be off base on this, but I vaguely remember him doing some show where he was exposing some mysteries and unexplained stuff. And I don't know. I could be wrong though.
I just remember in Ghostbusters, he had Ray's Occult Bookshop. I always thought that was cool.
Oh yeah. Well, what's interesting, the original Ghostbusters, they have they have all these references to Samaria, so they end up when that god comes through this Stargate or whatever it is. There's a pyramid and this glowing ball at the top of the pyramid, and it's some crazy Sumerian god or goddess. I forget. It's been a while since I've seen the movie.
That was Gozer the Gozerian, and it was an ancient Babylonian a god that went back to ancient Samaria. And what was interesting about it, and I thought it kind of reminded me, and I watched it recently, and it kind of reminded me of 9/11. Yeah, they're going through the blueprints of the building, and they found out they were like this entire building where Gozer the Gozerian had came through this ethereal gateway was built by the architect to be this gigantic like lightning rod for interstellar travel or travel between different dimensions. It was built, to be this thing that would amplify that. And they talked about that in the movie. I'm like, that you're not going to put that in a movie unless, you have a knowledge of this kind of stuff in real life. And there was a lot of little things in that movie where you were like, okay, somebody that was involved in this obviously has a legitimate interest in stuff. And I guess it's pretty obvious now that was Dan Aykroyd.
It could very well be. Well, Dan Aykroyd, he wrote a lot of stuff, if I remember correctly. I'm not 100% familiar with his career. But
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you another interesting thing here about Dan Aykroyd real quick. They've been working on a script for the new Ghostbusters movie, for Ghostbusters 3.
Oh, it's a new one. No way.
Yeah, they've been going through it. Well, if you're I don't know if you're a Bill Murray fan like I am. I'm a huge Bill Murray fan, and
Stripes.
He's got this thing where now to be in movies, he wants to be killed off in every movie. He was in that movie Zombieland. He got killed off in that. And so his thing to be in Ghostbusters 3 is that he wanted to be killed off at the end. And that's what it's supposed to be, is the kind of the old guard turning over to the new guard. Well, they've been working on the script for the past 3 or 4 years. They've been trying to get a script they can agree on. And Aykroyd recently was talking about some of this stuff with UFOs or some of this stuff with the crystal skulls. And somebody, threw in a question or something about Ghostbusters 3. And you know what he said? This was great. I thought this was just a great line. I thought you'd have to be informed of things to know that he was telling a joke. Most people just thought he was being serious. I got the joke in it. He said, "Oh yeah, we're almost done with the script. and we're going to have it done, and I'm writing it, and Bill Murray's going to be in it. And I go, oh, great. When is it going to be released? It's going to be released on December 31st, 2012. So if we make it past December 21st, the movie will come out. Basically, if we don't, then the movie's never going to come out. So he didn't say that, but he just said, yeah, it's going to come out December 31st, 2012. I was like, oh, yeah, right. You just said that probably in case, okay, well, great. If something happens, then we don't ever have to make the movie. I thought that was kind of a funny little inside joke there. But nonetheless, it like I said before, I think it's good to see. I wish we could see more people in these final days putting their money where their mouth is, and some of these people coming forward and wanting to fund things like the dig and the rock wall, other things. I mean, it's go time. We don't have any time left to just say, well, there's an ancient society down there, and uncovering it could, bring about the end of the power structure. But, hey, it's too dangerous or it's too impossible. We can't do it. We don't have time to do that anymore. We have to take every opportunity we can now to uncover everything. And I hope that many people out there listening tonight, Lee, echo our sentiments on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, while you were going over all that stuff, I did find that TV show that Dan Aykroyd did on All This Unexplained Information. It was called PSI Factor Chronicles of the Paranormal. And
Psi Factor. Yeah, I remember that show.
Psi Factor. Okay, PSI Factor. Okay, yeah, Psi Factor. I'm sorry. That was PSI Factor. But get this. The production company is called Atlantis Films.
Goodness.
That's who created this series, and there was a total of 88 episodes if the Wikipedia entry is correct on this. How ridiculous is that? It never ends, does it?
Never. It never. It's always creeping around every corner. It's creeping in all the places you're never looking, and that's it's very interesting. We talked earlier about William Bramley's Gods of Eden. And I think what I was reading last night, I think was mentioning that, or maybe been last Thursday. I can't remember what it was, but one of the things it was talking about was how the priest class early on, in order to keep mankind from finding out about the secret knowledge, created the system of symbols and symbology that we now see in the Freemasonry and in the Illuminati and in the priest class, all of these things, and that because that after a succession of years, there became fewer and fewer people that actually knew what those symbols really meant. And so there was a much larger interpretation for these symbols at first, but through the years that was lost. And so people would then start to associate these symbols with the occult or with everything else because they didn't know the true origin of these symbols. And that's very interesting to me, Lee, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen people fighting over, what does this symbol mean? Or what does the square and compass in Freemasonry mean? Or what does the G mean? And they say, oh, well, it means grand architect. Or no, it means God. Or no, it means, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, all of these symbols have multiple meanings, and all of them could be correct because that is initially how the priest class started hiding the secret knowledge from people. They were put it in a symbol, and that symbol would be a compressed, watered-down version for a much larger, much huger explanation that fell in line with the ancient teachings and the ancient knowledge. That is the origins of the symbology that we see used by secret societies, illuminated fraternities, and others.
Right, sure. And especially in ancient times, you had to use symbols primarily to communicate because you couldn't go to Staples and purchase some paper and pens and write down your thoughts. So a lot of this stuff was put into symbology to communicate to people who... Yeah, I mean, because you couldn't just, again, you didn't have the type of systems that you have in place today. So that's where all these symbols came into being, and that's how people communicated, or that's how they hid knowledge. Because back in ancient times, if you were a scribe, that was a rarity. It wasn't, that was essentially considered to be a very skilled profession. And if you were a scribe, you'd be working for somebody who was a king, or you'd be working with a priest.
That was your life.
That was your life, and you worked with the elite, and that's why symbols were used so frequently. But even
absolutely,
even when you look at our alphabets and the different languages that are in existence today, it's all based off of symbolism. So really, when you look at the importance of symbolism, it really controls everything in a certain sense. It controls how people view reality. It controls how people communicate. It's a very important aspect to how human beings throughout history have communicated.
It's so fascinating, Lee, because you get down to, I mean, we could probably talk about this all night too, because you get down to the roots of how language has been used as a form of mind control.
Yes.
It absolutely has, because when you limit the amount of words that people know and the amount of words that people have, you also limit their ability to understand and know things beyond what that language entails. And I think that humankind is definitely, in many cases already come across that, because oftentimes we don't have words to describe the things that it is possible for us to experience in this three-dimensional transitory reality. So I think that's really seeing that the foundations of language and ancient knowledge being contorted into this easy to digest small package of symbols and language originating from the same source that the bastardization of ancient knowledge that could be used for the expansion of humankind came from is coming from the same source. I mean, again, from day one, it's been about keeping us confined and keeping us from being able to achieve any potential we may be aware of or able to have. It's just mind-blowing and fascinating, and one of the reasons why I stay on top of this stuff day in and day out. It's uber fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, real life is far more fascinating than anything that you see from Hollywood, anything you see from any of these characters. Although it is interesting because Hollywood takes real life and they transplant it into their films. So you can take a look at these Hollywood films and actually research a lot of these science fiction movies or a lot of this stuff that's put out there to fictionalize the truth, and you can get a better understanding of what is really going on versus watching Fox News or any of those other bozos that you see on TV. So I definitely think that's certainly something to consider. And to everybody out there in the audience, I think it's very important to understand that. But Josh, we've been going at this for now 2 hours, and I think it might be time for a short break. What do you think?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. That's what we'll do. Okay. So we're going to take another 5-minute break. Going to play some music. And then, Josh, on the other side, I want to get into the New Madrid fault line. I want to get your take on what's happening with that. That's been news a great deal, this national level exercise, the earthquake, and the drilling. So I haven't researched this topic as much as I think you have. So I definitely like to get your take on that. And that's exactly what we'll do. So, folks, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation with my guest, Josh Reeves. Check out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Third and final hour of the show. I'm here with my guest, Josh Reeves, and we're dissecting a number of different aspects of the world order system. Lots of interesting topics of conversation tonight. And, Josh, I wanted to get into the New Madrid fault line. This is something that has come up over the past couple of months. It's been a fairly hot topic in the conspiracy research community, or whatever you want to call this community that we're a part of, I guess. I mean, depends upon your point of view. But what's your take on this whole thing? There's, of course, this national level exercise that's taking place there that's gotten a lot of attention. I believe it's going to be taking place soon in the next couple of months. And there's been an earthquake down there. There's all sorts of weird drilling. There just seems to be a lot of very strange activity there. And you were telling me before that you actually visit Arkansas for a period of time recently. So I'd like to get your thoughts on the New Madrid fault line and how you think this ties into what's going on right now.
Well, absolutely. And I had a few months back on my show, I had started talking about, the fact that you look at all the different fault lines around the United States. You look at the history of that. And I started looking into that, of course, after we started to see, the earthquake in Chile, the earthquake in Haiti, on and on and on. We started hearing more and more about massive earthquakes. We had all of these earthquakes happening in various places. And then I thought was coincidentally around that time was when we first started finding out about and hearing about this phenomenon of hydraulic fracturing. And fracking, as they call it, and that is depicted in the movie Gasland, where they talk about this. And I started noticing that was coming out around that same time, and I started thinking, there's a very good possibility that all this stuff they're talking about fracking and natural gas. So I'm not denying that any of that information isn't true. I'm not saying that any of it isn't, or that earthquakes aren't caused by this, because we know they are. But it seemed like a convenient front story. To where, you get people hopping mad and being against all this fracking stuff. And then there's a much bigger issue at hand here. And then I started saying, well, it is indeed possible that, they've been telling us and warning us about this, this big California earthquake where, there have been preparations for earthquakes made there, but yet we had, I guess, I don't know, it was about 120 years ago, 150 years ago. I can't remember what it was, but there was a massive earthquake in the late 1800s, early 1900s, something like that, along the New Madrid fault line, and which actually caused the Mississippi River to run backwards for 2 weeks. That literally happened.
This is in the early 1800s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
Okay.
like that.
Yep.
And it actually caused to run backwards. And I started looking at this, and there was this guy, Iben Browning, I-B-E-N, Iben Browning. The band Uncle Tupelo had written a song about this guy in the early 90s called New Madrid. And it was coincidentally, I'd heard this song. I put a CD of theirs on. I happened to be listening to it right when I was doing this research. And I was going, my goodness, what's going on with this? I find out about this guy, Iben Browning. He was the guy that was saying, even before global warming was rolled out by the elite, he was the first guy 20, 30 years ago that was saying that, man-made global warming would be false. And he predicted that there would be a massive earthquake along the New Madrid fault line that would split the country down the middle, cause the Mississippi River to become 100 miles wide, the Great Lakes to spill into it, and basically create this big, chasm of water right in the middle of the United States, splitting it in half. And we started to see all these reports of earthquakes happening, swarms of earthquakes happening, hundreds and hundreds of earthquakes happening in Arkansas. There, someone just in my chat room pointed out 1812. The New Madrid earthquake originally happened in 1812. So yes, Lee, you were correct. Early 1800s there. But we started seeing swarms of earthquakes. People were saying it was probably because of hydraulic fracturing or something else. And then we start finding out about this Army arsenal that's located around Little Rock, Arkansas, where allegedly they had transported some of the VX gas that was brought from Saddam Hussein's empire, and they were going to be, allegedly the story is they were dispensing of this stuff in the fault lines in Arkansas, and that this is what the John Parsons Wheeler, who was found dead in a landfill, was getting ready to blow the whistle on. Now, I actually talked to a gentleman while I was in Arkansas over the weekend. I had gone up there with a friend who had some time off and asked me to go with him. And I said, sure, I need a road trip. I need a little break from doing all this. So I decided, hey, why not? Maybe I'll talk to some people while I was up there. And I talked to a guy whose father was actually a spook, a full-blown spook. He said his father was a CIA agent. And I was telling him about my show and stuff. And he was just, 100% agreement with everything I was saying. And he said, do you know about the arsenal in near Little Rock, right? And that's all he said. And I said, yeah, I'm fully aware of that. And he said, well, all I can say is there's more going on with that than the public can tell. And I started going, yeah, there is. And I started rattling off the information. He didn't say anything when I rattled off the information, and he certainly didn't deny that anything I was saying was plausible. But I will say this. With National Level Exercise 2011 coming up in May, and I had started looking into this New Madrid thing before finding out about that. When I found out they were having this massive drill on that exact scenario of an earthquake happening in that region, you better bet red lights started going off for me saying, oh, my goodness, they may be trying to basically enact this. And it ties in, again, what we were talking about earlier with these various sites and various events happening around the world that could cause big problems for the elite in revealing things they don't want revealed. Well, subsequently, we already know all the things that have been launched by the elite out of Arkansas. I mean, that was the Rockefeller Kingdom up there for the longest time. The Rockefeller's
oil empire, yes.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the country.
They owned it up there. Of course, we have the cocaine operations in MENA. We also have the basically the selling out of America through Walmart. NAFTA happened up there with the Clintons working with Sam Walton and that whole empire, proving yet again the phoniness of the left-right paradigm. That's going to be in the new film, The Cigarette Volume 2. We're going to show how Sam Walton had Hillary Clinton on the board of directors for Walmart, paying for the Clintons' campaigns and all this stuff. And this guy's a right-winger, a right-wing Christian guy, and he just happens to be in the same group. This guy, the guys responsible for getting Bill Clinton in office, just happens to be in the same group that cooked up the plan to impeach him. I mean, my goodness, and I'm not going to get off that tangent because I know we're talking about this, but it ties into this because when I started seeing, the idea of this, well, the entire bottom level of the entire state of Arkansas is crystal. It's quartz crystal, and it's a very powerful. And it's said that the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, the ancients, traveled to Arkansas to that area to use these crystals for their ancient technology that they had. And when we talked about earlier with the rock wall, you think about, well, it's about a 4 or 5 hour drive from where I'm at up to the area where we went. So by horse or whatever primitive technology that they had back then, you're talking about a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks is not that far for them to travel to this area where these crystals are located to bring back and create this rock wall. So I started seeing this pattern between Egypt and Yemen and all these things. And I started going, oh my goodness, they might stage a massive earthquake in Arkansas to cover up what is there because it ties into this ancient technology. Well, lo and behold, Lee, after the Japan thing breaks out, there's a story comes out about how there's a nuclear reactor in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is not far from where I was at. And this is another one of these GE reactors that's the same as the one that was in Japan. And what's interesting, this article talks about how they have found contradictory information on the safety of this. You've got one report saying it's safe and it can withstand up to this level of a quake. And then you've got other information that says, no, that's not true. It can only withstand up to a level of this quake. But the fact of the matter is, if a massive earthquake along the San Andreas Fault happens, you are going to have a Japanese situation right in the heart of this country, the same as what they have in Japan right now. And with the information we have with, how the elite and the New World Order have been operating up there in Arkansas for years, this information about this arsenal and this VX gas, the John Parsons Wheeler being found in the dumpster, we've got a lot of smoke here. And generally where there's smoke, there's fire. So I tell you what, people up there in Arkansas that I talked to, they're freaked out about this. But luckily, everybody I talked to, like I talked to one lady and she said, before I could even get the words out, she said, New Madrid fault line. And I said, oh, you know about that? And she said, yeah. Because they had a 3.2 earthquake up there in Bentonville back last year. And I actually saw concrete places that were cracked open. And everybody up there seems to be paying attention. I was glad to see that all the people I talked to were quite aware of the earthquakes. They were aware of New Madrid. They were aware of National Level Exercise 2011. They were aware of it without, Alex Jones or myself or anybody else, fear-mongering them. They were just, genuinely concerned with it. And I think that's a good thing because it just seems to me very ironically that everywhere we've identified places that were important to the ancient people that existed on this planet happen to be the areas where these massive operations are happening. I mean, it's just too big to ignore anymore.
Well, it's either just a massive coincidence or it's an operation. And of course, when you see these things happening in various locations multiple times, you have to draw the conclusion that it's an operation because there's only so many coincidences that actually take place. And I think this whole New Madrid fault line thing is certainly something to keep an eye on. This exercise, which is going to occur in a couple of months, is obviously very suspicious. Isn't FEMA running this thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
of course.
FEMA. Okay, yeah, you got the whole
Who else?
the whole FEMA apparatus. I don't know. It's been a while since I've looked at this information, but I assume that was who was going to be running it.
It's a safe assumption, bro. If there's criminality and drills going on for possible scenarios happening, FEMA's going to be there. I mean, my goodness, they're so smart. They were in New York on September 10th, 2001. That's pretty damn good foresight, wouldn't you say?
Well, that just shows that they're such a great governmental agency.
Oh, they are.
Yeah,
Man,
they're right on the ball. That's for sure.
God, they were there the day before. Thank goodness.
Yeah, well, a lot of good they did.
My God. Just the same day there was trillions missing from the Pentagon. Maybe that was their payoff.
Yeah, it could be. What, $2.3 trillion?
Yeah.
And didn't Rumsfeld, he made some lame excuse about how, well, what was it? Oh, no, the money, we just didn't know where it was, and, well, that's just too bad. And I forget what he said, but it was the lamest excuse. I mean, how the hell do you lose $2.3 trillion? Well, it's unbelievable. If
I recall correctly, it was something along the lines, and I'm going by memory too, but if I remember correctly, it was something he did the kind of, thing that he always, where he would just, what I call baffling people with bull, that's basically what he was doing, Well, there are known knowns and unknown unknowns. It was that kind of thing. He was like, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's missing. I think to say that it's missing would be putting it a little heavy. We just right now aren't able to locate it. So it's not that it's missing. It's not that it's stolen. Stolen is a strong word, too. We're not going to say stolen. We're not going to say missing. Right now, we are unable to locate it, but that doesn't mean it was stolen, and it doesn't mean there was any criminality going on. It's like, come on, dude.
That guy's such a clown, man. And plus, he's all over TV now, and he's promoting his new book. Have you seen that guy?
You know what? It's interesting. I was just telling my buddy over the weekend about how ever since Rumsfeld left office, he's been hiding out down in that military base in the mountain down there in Paraguay where Sun Myung Moon and the Bushes bought land at. I was just telling my buddy that over the weekend. And right before we started the show tonight, my friend sent me an email and said, hey, man, Rumsfeld's all over friggin' Fox News right now. Have you seen this? And so, yeah, I was just alerted to that. What's going on with that?
I don't know, man. I mean, I saw this guy. He was on, he actually did an interview with Opie and Anthony. I don't know if you heard about that, where one of the comedians, I forget who, asked him if he was a lizard. Yeah, that one. He was on CNBC. And yeah, he's been pretty much all over the corporate media, just promoting his book, and it's unbelievable. You know, what's really funny about these characters is that they engage in all this criminality, and then after they finish engaging all their criminality, they write about it, and they sell 1 million books, and they make a ton of money, and it's just a sick situation. And so this guy's doing the same thing that Bush did a few months ago with his little book tour, and admitting that he ordered an authorized torture and all sort of garbage. These people are sick.
Well, you see, it's the same as what we were talking about earlier, Lee, with Ray McGovern. You know, it's the same type of operation. It's like they put these guys in ops, they have them out there doing their jobs for years, and then when they get ready to retire, in order so they can still, you know, keep up the status that they've had up to this point, and also be able to reconcile where they're getting a paycheck from. That's what they do. You know, well, now we're going to put you out on a book tour, and you get to write, you know, go promote this ghost written book that you didn't even write. Right. That is going to tell people the official story of what you did while you were on the job and all this stuff. And then they get to go out and you know, whatever the hot topic story is in the news at that time, they inadvertently, it always happens, get asked about while they're out doing a book tour. So coincidentally enough, right now, as we have all this stuff going on with Japan, Libya, just coincidentally, right in the middle of this, Donald Rumsfeld is going to have a book tour. So every time he goes on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever it may be to promote his new book, well, while we have you here, Mr. Rumsfeld, would you mind giving us your opinion on how Barack Obama is handling Libya? And then, boom, what do you get? You get the automatic Rumsfeld spin machine for free as a byproduct of having him on to promote his book. Oh, it's just coincidental, and doesn't that just work out great for everybody? No, this is pre-planned in advance.
That's right. That's a very good point, because it's kind of funny that here you have Donald Rumsfeld, who essentially was the defense secretary during the time where they architected this entire phony terror war for, I don't know how long he was in office, but he was in office for 6 years in the Bush administration, at least roughly 6 years before Gates came in. And now, again, yeah, he's spreading the same type of propaganda pretty much on behalf of the Obama administration, engaging these phony arguments. And it's really funny how you see the media spin the arguments. They don't argue, well, maybe we should talk about whether or not we should be bombing Libya. No, instead the argument is, well, we don't like the rhetoric that Obama is using. He should be saying that we need to go directly after Gaddafi, and he's not saying that. And so you have this debate between the Republicans and the Democrats over something that has no significance whatsoever. And this is just a hallmark of how these people operate. It's sick.
No, it absolutely is, and that's exactly how they operate. And I find it highly, highly interesting that you know, people forget. They forget things, or they simply just don't remember certain parts. I don't know. I've had a problem with how, you know, the Project for a New American Century documents have always been used as, you know, the smoking gun evidence for the 9/11 truth community. And it's like because that information about, you know, a new catalyzing catastrophic event like a new Pearl Harbor is in there, and it is such a smoking gun. But it's like, because that's in there, people just ignore everything else. They forget the admissions of using, you know, race-specific bioweapons. They forget the fact that you had, you know, Ron Paul's buddy, Lou Laramon, the admitted Zionist, the admitted Sovereign Military Order of Malta member, who Ron Paul wrote a gold book, The Case for Gold, with. He's a signatory on that. The truthers never want to bring that up. And so it doesn't shock me now that nobody seems to want to bring up on radio or anywhere else that right there, smack dab in the middle of the Project for New American Century documents, is the plan for Libya that we're seeing now. It's right there, folks. Why don't you go back and take a second look? That's all I got to say on Libya. Go back and look at PNAC again. It's all there.
Well, everything that's happening is, of course, part of a plan. I mean, we see mass destabilization happening in the Middle East, and none of this is by accident. I mean, if anybody is to tell me that all of a sudden we have, what is it, roughly 10 or 11 countries all of a sudden destabilizing at once, that is not something that happens at a pure chance. That is part of a larger overall operation. I mean, just from a geopolitical standpoint, Josh, I mean, what do you think all this is let me rephrase this. Where do you think all this is going in terms of how fast this is going to escalate? I mean, do you see this thing escalating to the point where things get really out of control this year, or do you think it's going to take until 2012? Because I mean, this stuff is just it's moving faster than ever before, and I'm sure you have the same challenges. It's almost impossible on a day-to-day basis to cover everything because there's so much happening. And it's happening so quick.
Well, and before I answer your question, I want to say this. I've gotten to the point with what you just said, Lee. I've gotten to the point on my show, and you know this because you've heard me talk about it on my show. But I want to say this to your audience. I've just gotten to the point where I'm not going to allow, and I know you've had this attitude as well. I've heard you say it on your show. I'm just not going to allow these people to, use us in the alternative media as another part of their, another extension of them by getting us to concentrate solely on whatever these issues they deem to be in the news cycle at the time. And it's very difficult to do that because when you do a news program like many of us do, you oftentimes are subject to whatever's coming out. So I've been being more and more selective in certain stories I know are going to get a lot of play. I might skip that one, and move on to talk about something else because as you said, everything is just moving at such a pace. And again, I've seen this happening over the past several years since we've been on air. I've been seeing it going that way intentionally so that people just get so overwhelmed and have basically so much sensory overload that they just shut down and basically say, you know what, I don't even want to pay attention at all. And I think that you asked, where this is moving to and what is the culmination of all this. And, when you see with things like what I've described many times as the disaster economy, I think this Japan thing ties into that. They're tearing down so that they can rebuild again. And then when the rebuilding is done, they will have the political chess pieces in place to be able to redraw the lines on the map. I mean, that sounds like a very simplistic low-level way of saying it, Lee, but really for the average person out there, that's what people need to understand, that's essentially what the plan of the New World Order is. They're redrawing the lines on the maps. They are setting up new territories. They are setting up new boundaries. They're setting up new nation states. This is all a recalibration of the world order to change around what the existing order is so they can restart the game at zero all over again and continue the plan on into the future with the same system that is in place now, but done different, done a little differently. Things are changed. Countries are different. They're called different things. But really, it's just the same empire and the same way of life that it was before. It just has new names and new faces and everything else. And when you look historically, Lee, this is what they've done every time they've allowed an empire to rise and fall and come down again. So I have to say that historically, I see us heading the same way that other empires have come. But who's always been the standby, Lee, no matter what? Who has always not gone away when all the other places have crumbled and fell? Who's it been there always?
Well, there's been China.
Rome.
Rome. Of course.
What I'm saying is they're still going to be there. Of course, you'll have all the Asiatic states and you'll have a new bloc there that's already been formed for years. But what I'm saying is they're moving things around to where everything has a different definition of it. What it is, and on the face surface of it, yes, 50, 75, 100 years from now, people will look back and see a very different world between the world we're existing in now and the world they're existing in the future. But just as we do when we look back 100 years, 200 years, but really nothing has changed. So I think that's what we see going on now is that the reason it's reaching such a fever pitch for them is because they know they have a limited time to achieve whatever it is they want to achieve in its totality. And if it gets past that certain period of time, there's going to be too much revealed and it's going to be too late for these people. And that's what scares me the most.
Well, of course
they're psychotic.
Right. Well, they're centered.
I'm afraid they're gonna pull the trigger on us once we do reveal this, or once we do get to the point where we can overturn this. I mean, it's just scary.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they're centering everything around 2012, I think, is giving them the excuse to justify this quickening. And what's really interesting is that we're only, it's getting pretty close to that December 21st, 2012 date. And
yeah,
I'll be honest with you, man, I'll be relieved when that date is come and gone, just like Y2K. It's almost the same thing over again. I remember this whole buildup that they put us through back in 1998, 1999, all this fear about how the computers are going to blow up and how you wouldn't be able to withdraw cash, all the cash machines would break down and society would turn to chaos. Well, none of that happened. None of it happened. And I see the same type of buildup happening here in the alternative media. Everybody fear-mongering about 2012, just like they did back in the late 1990s and culminated with that disgusting Y2K broadcast that I'm sure most people listening already are familiar with. And my fears, well, I shouldn't say fears really, but what I see potentially happening is that we could see similar types of broadcasts leading up to December 21st, 2012, with any number of absurd stories based off of rumors or just absolute BS. And that's another thing I want to get your take on, because I've seen just a dramatic increase in the amount of BS stories coming to my mailbox. People talking about Chinese troops down in Mexico. People like Steve Quayle fear-mongering about all this non-existent stuff that has no factual basis in reality. And I think this is going to continue in a big, big way. I mean, what's your take on all this fear-mongering stuff and this mass build-up to 2012 and how all this stuff is correlating together?
Well, there's no doubt there's been a lot of disinformation, misinformation. There's been a lot of assumptions made on the subject. I really have this opinion where I don't think that 2012 is complete BS per se. I believe that the interpretations of it and the way that it's been presented to the public is definitely has a priest class slant to it. To me, it's always been the way for them to get people who don't believe in biblical prophecy to still buy into one of the priest class into the world scenarios. That's 100% what I see it as, Lee, and I believe that it is that way when you look at the correlations that we've gone over many times about the CMP and those people involved. I just don't think it's a coincidence that these same entities that control the phony patriot movement and the phony truth movement and everything else that talk about 2012 so much, I cannot see it as a coincidence that those are the same people that are trying to get people to believe. Because many people who are in the truth movement, patriot movement, many people who are looking at research, you have a big split. You have many of those people who are Christian and consider themselves Christian because they consider that to be a Christian thing. But then you have other people who are not Christian, not in any way, shape, or form involved in organized religion, and many times they consider themselves to be atheists. And atheism is an extension of the priest class as well. It's no different from Christianity or anything else. It's a way to get you to believe in a dogma. And I think that the 2012 fear-mongering stuff has been a way for them to get a fear reaction and basically a chill factor reaction out of people who don't believe in biblical prophecy and the rest of this stuff. Now, that's not to say that I believe that 2012 isn't still a significant that isn't a significant date. It talked about the end of the known world, not the end of the world, but the end of the known world, the end of the world as we know it and as we have known it up to this time. Not death and destruction and Nibiru coming back and the Anunnaki coming back to eat our souls or any of this stuff.
There's been a lot of that being put out there by people. Strictly that we were going to move into a world that was going to be quite different. And I see that as a positive thing. I mean, everybody else is fear-mongering this, and I'm going, wait a minute. I mean, this could be good. There is just as much of a possibility, Lee, that this could be a good thing as it could be a bad thing, isn't there? Absolutely. I mean, if you take a look at the world right now, I would say that's pretty damn screwed up.
What they were trying to tell us, hey, don't worry, don't be in fear, don't have fear about anything, because no matter how bad things are for humans right now, when the end of the known world happens, all that's going to go away and it's going to be there. But yet that's being corrupted. I'm just saying this is a possibility. That's being corrupted into fear and death and destruction, everything else. I mean, when you look at everything else these people have done, when you look at the examples of where they've done exactly that with other things, you can't help but think that we are, because the power of manifestation and the power of belief is very real. And if you get the mass majority of people in the world to believe something and put their power and their energy into it, it can cause it to manifest. So I believe that they are trying to get the whole of the people of the world to believe that doom and gloom and the end of the world is happening, so that when the end of the known world, as the mind describes it, comes, it will not manifest itself into the end of the world that these people are keeping down upon us to keep us enslaved. It will be the full-on fruition and continuation of that. I'm telling you, Lee, they are using our energy and trying to get us to have negative fear energy in this so that they can ride it the way they want it to go and not the way it may be intended to go, which could be, again, just as much of a possibility this could be for the bringing down of the current system and of the priest class as it could be doom and gloom. That's all I'm saying. There is just as much a chance here. Why are we focusing on only the negative? Somebody has to be programming us to be having that response to this. And as you said, Lee, I believe that is the operation going on.
Well, I sincerely hope that something good happens in 2012 because, my God, I mean, you take a look at the world around us right now, and again, there's a lot of problems here. And so my hope is that something good happens. And but, you know, I mean, the thing is that with all the fear mongering and everything that we've seen, I just don't believe anything bad is going to happen in 2012 because they're trying to put this idea out there, just like they did during 2000, that all these horrible things are going to happen. And, you know, look, guess what? I mean, if let's say that Planet X is real and it crashes into the planet, well, is there anything that any one of us can do about it? Not particularly. That's just something that's going to happen. So I just don't see why in the first place we even have to worry about this Planet X or a comet or an asteroid hitting into the planet. But
like you said, you know, what's it matter anyway? I mean, how does that affect the price of tea in China? How does that affect, you know, whether or not you're going to be able to afford to put a roof over your head and food on your table this week and next week?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
But that's what they want. They want us like to be so in fear about it and worried about it every day. I mean, you can't help but think that these bastards are trying to manipulate our energy to cause something to happen that may not be happening on its own. But if enough people believe it, it's a very real possibility it could happen. And I just say we've given these people enough of our energy already.
Yeah, they're like these psychic vampires. It's hard
exactly
to explain. These people, they're out of control with everything that they're doing right now. And well, I tell you what, another interesting correlation, this whole thing, and I'm not sure if you've heard any of my shows talking about this, but there's this character that was on that Ancient Alien show called William J. Fulco. I believe that's his name. His last name's Fulco. Anyway, he's a Jesuit priest.
Yeah, I saw him.
Yeah, okay, so you're familiar with this guy. And he's worked with the Gibsons. He worked with Mel Gibson on The Passion of the Christ, was actually responsible for the translation of the language.
Aramaic.
Yeah, he was responsible for all that stuff. And what I find really interesting is how the Jesuits and the Vatican have a great deal of their energy just tied into astronomy, to studying the skies. I find that to be a very interesting correlation to all of this. And I think it's another piece of the puzzle because, remember, hundreds of years ago, they were actually going after scientists and astronomers for being heretics because their discoveries were changing the way people viewed the world and threatened their entire supremacy of the church. Because back during that time, the church was a very significant and powerful force, still is, but back then it was entrenched in almost all aspects of society. And that's why you saw the Protestant Reformation and a lot of these other things that took place. But I think a lot of that's continuing. They're still trying to maintain control over a lot of this information through the fact that they have these observatories and they have these Jesuit astronomers and so forth and so on. I mean, what's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's 2 + 2 = 4 as always. I mean, when you look at the fact that, as we talked about earlier, with the custodians and the ones that were the intermediaries having this information, yeah, you know, they're definitely. It's definitely quite obvious that the priest class is aware of something out there. They're aware of people that have ancient knowledge. And my goodness, look at the freaking stuff that the Pope wears. I mean, look at these, the crosses, which, the crosses, the cross comes back from in Egypt. You had the Ankh. And that's another symbol of these custodians that goes back. The cross is always a symbol of the custodial bloodlines. It goes back and back and back and back and back. And when you see the things that the Pope wears with his fish hat and all this other stuff, I mean, he's wearing the iconography of the custodians. It becomes very obvious that these people that are seen as the sort of the go between you and God, the big man upstairs, is like, you got to go in the confession booth. Well, no, I don't. All I got to do is go, get on my knees or go, close my eyes and get in meditation or whatever. As Bill Hicks said, that middleman thing, it's kooky and I appreciate it, but I've got a direct line to the man myself. I mean, the whole thing about it is that you and I don't have the power of divine intervention, or you and I, or the rest of any of us, we don't have the power to communicate with God or with the gods or with the higher power on our own. No, we have to allow these people to do it. Well, that's the same thing they want to basically have when it comes to knowledge about extraterrestrials or any of this other stuff. That's why they own the world's largest observatories. That's why they have all this knowledge in the Vatican Library, because they have always been the ones that decided what mankind could know and what they can't know, because they don't want us to know too much, because then if we know too much, they're out of power. So this is exactly why they're rolling these guys out now on these shows on, Ancient Aliens, and they're talking about the Anunnaki and the rest of this stuff. It's classic gatekeeping stuff, because now they're allowing a little bit more of this stuff to trickle out slower and slower, because I believe it is later going to serve their much larger operation for phony disclosure, possible, scenario of telling us that, hostile aliens are trying to invade us, when in fact they may not even be hostile aliens. That's something one of them, Ron, talked about. When he described the scenario he described many times, he talked about, it wouldn't be the fact that they would be lying to us and staging. That's what the misinterpretation of that statement that Carol Rosen had made several times. And going back and listening to the interviews with her, I realized that people had been, including myself, had been misquoting that for years. And he actually said that he didn't just say they would stage an alien invasion. He said that they would, that the alien invasion, they would tell the humans that the alien invasion was by hostile aliens, so that they would want to act offensively, and it would be, in fact, because the aliens were here to, try and bend the error of our ways. So it's just an unbelievable line, especially when you think about that in terms of, seeing Hitler with these various popes, and seeing, Pope Ratzinger giving the salute, the Sieg Heil salute, and you see all these connections with how Hitler was building UFOs. I mean, it's just it's mind blowing, man. It's one big bundle, and when you think things don't interconnect, I got news for you. All of this stuff interconnects somehow. It's all a part of the master plan, especially when you're reading it from the media. I mean, any media worldwide is essentially the mouthpiece for the master plan, isn't it?
Well, sure. I think you brought up some good points about fascism and, of course, the ties to the Pope, the Nazis, and also Mussolini. It's interesting because you essentially had a fascist, Mussolini, that enabled the Vatican to have its seat of power where it is today, at least in terms of the Vatican being a sovereign nation. And, well, he was very accepting of all that. And granted, I mean, the priests have always had the power, but Mussolini helped facilitate a lot of this stuff, and he was very close to the priests. And when you talk about the term fascism, it's largely associated with Mussolini and how he described it. So there's a lot of very interesting correlations there. And, of course, you can take a look at the whole fascist ideology, and you see how not only does it tie in with Mussolini, the Nazis, and all that, but it also ties in with a lot of these groups that are tied in with right-wing politics, including the John Birch Society, and a lot of these are characters that we see in the Patriot movement and the overall realm and scope of the priest class. It's very interesting. But, Josh, another interesting point I wanted to bring up and get your take on is the fact that the Bible, there was a story that came out recently talking about how they're changing words around the Bible, and they're saying that, well, it's because we have to make the Bible more modern. And they have used all sorts of excuses throughout the history to include various texts in the Bible, or to not include various texts in the Bible, or to change words around, or to translate things a certain way, that it's almost as if they're trying to get to the point where the Bible and the various texts almost lose a lot of its original intention. I don't know what you think about that, but it just seems very odd to me that they're constantly trying to make these subtle changes to a book that's supposedly the Word of God. Now, if this book is really the Word of God, why would you be making changes to it?
Yeah, there's always editorial jobs done on the Bible throughout history. Yeah. And I think that comes as a direct result of the fact that as time progresses and more discoveries are made by mankind, we discover more and more things, which leads us to more and more questions, which leads us then to more and more answers. I think that now it's reached the point, as I've talked about here on your show with you and on my show many times through the years, this is why there has been such a quest for the antiquities, a quest for the ancient cylinder seals and clay tablets and all of this stuff, because, 30, 40, 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, we didn't have a recollection or a knowledge of what genetic manipulation was or any of this stuff that they talked about in the Bible or in these ancient texts. But now that man has, through our scientific evolution, now gained a much broader knowledge of what some of these ancient things are talking about. Now they're starting to figure out that people have now understood what the book of Genesis, the gene of Isis, the genealogy of Isis, and the that whole thing, what a science fiction epic the book of Genesis is. And so I think now that humankind has progressed through the information age, and since there has been so much free information now available on the internet that anybody can go and look up, I think they're scrambling, Lee. I think they're going in there doing a whack job now, editing stuff out of it. All I can say is, people need to go out and snap up old Bibles and make copies of them and stuff and hold on to them, because there's no telling what might not be in there, a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. And it could be something that could very well be the piece of information we're all looking for to uncover this stuff. But I mean, in the Pope, what was it, a couple weeks ago? The Pope says, once and for all, the Jews had nothing to do with the death of Jesus. I about wet myself. That was so damn funny.
Yeah, the Pope's been making all sorts of crazy statements, hasn't he?
They're just making stuff up now and throwing it out there, just like, and letting it stick, and just like, okay, Jews had nothing to do with the death of Jesus. All right, end of story. There you go. I said it. It's well. How do you know? How can you say that for years and years? It's just like changing the Bible. I mean, it's unbelievable, the hubris of these people at this point.
Well, it's kind of funny. Maybe the Pope has a time machine. Maybe he's just so maybe he traveled back in time and was able to
surprise me.
Well, you never know. He might have some extraterrestrial technology that allows him to go back 2,000 years and observe what took place. But I don't know. These people are just out of control. And plus, that guy's made some crazy statements about pedophilia. And if I remember correctly,
it's healthy.
Yeah, some nonsense like that. These are some really twisted bastards. But if I remember correctly, the Vatican actually has the youngest age of consent in the world. It's something like 12 or 13. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're basically dealing with here is we're dealing with this priest class of twisted perverts and pedophiles and homosexuals. Now, I'm not saying that every single one of these people are, but clearly there is a substantial amount of people tied in with the Vatican and the Catholic Church and religion as a whole that is really into this type of stuff. I mean, plus some of these rabbis engaging in some of this really twisted type of religious activity with the sucking of the baby's foreskin or whatever it is that they do. It was some disgusting ritual that I saw a photo of a little while back. These are some disgusting people, man. They
literally suck the blood out of the foreskin of the circumcised penis. There's pictures of it. They literally do that.
There's a picture, and you can find this, of a rabbi literally putting his mouth on the baby's genitals. It's absolutely disgusting. And this is some accepted religious practice. I mean, unbelievable stuff. You can't make it up.
No, and especially, I mean, when you look at the when you look at the evidence on these clowns, man, I mean, that's the kind of thing just doesn't look good. I mean, I believe that you'd be a fool to believe that the people that of Jewish lineage are not involved in things at the highest level. You'd have to be an absolute fool to believe that. But I also think you'd have to be an absolute fool to believe they run everything. But the fact of the matter is, what I believe or what anybody else believes, really, does it really matter when you have a picture like that? I mean, my God, all the stuff about blood sacrifice and taking the soul or taking the the etherical energy. I mean, there are people out there, Lee, who are into eating. Have you heard about this? People who are into eating live food.
Live food? You mean like while the animals are alive?
Yeah.
That is absolutely disgusting, but it wouldn't surprise me.
They'll eat it. It's basically like it's like killed on your plate, or like or like a lobster or something like that, where immediately the people that eat this describe a phenomenon where you can literally feel the energy running through their bodies and coursing through their veins when they're eating food that's live. And I believe that absolutely ties in to this phenomenon you just described with these Jewish rabbis taking the blood and sucking the blood out of the foreskin penis of the child during the circumcision. They're gaining something from that. They're gaining something of the essence is going into this person. It sounds very demonic, and whether or not you believe in demons or any of that stuff, I mean, you can't help but think that this is some sort of practice that is being done for a very specific purpose, because if it wasn't done, if it wasn't being done for a very certain specific purpose, they wouldn't keep doing it. This is a very, very dark thing that's being done with intent.
There's no question about it. I think that's largely what you see with a lot of this pedophilia and a lot of these disgusting things that these people are doing. I don't think they're doing it just because it's something that they're doing just for the sake of doing it. I think, like you said, there is a specific reason why these things are being done, and they're conducted in a very ritualistic manner in many cases. And, well, I mean, even on a much broader scale, you see how a lot of these war-related events are really blood sacrifice rituals and are done in a certain way, in which, if you understand how these people operate, it's obvious, but to the average person, they have no idea. And what really gets me, Josh, is that there is an overwhelming amount of evidence to indicate that the Catholic Church and a lot of these people associated with it are into some extremely vile things, but they're so brainwashed that they just keep going back to church and they keep putting money in the collection plates. It's absolutely incredible. And it's certainly something that I hope changes in the near future, because the fact that there's 1 billion people, 1 billion plus people, a lot of people down in South America especially, it's Catholic Church is huge down there. That's the amount of people following this disgusting, depraved priest-class church, and it needs to come to an end.
Well, they've got that thing down there in the Dominican Republic that was paid for by the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. It's called the Pharaoh Colon. It's this giant windowless building that's shaped like a cross, and at night they project a 3D holographic image of a cross up into the sky, and the locals tell stories of blood sacrifice and screams and everything else coming out from the inside of that place. So, I mean, again, if they're funding that kind of stuff going on, you should go see this place. It's just gigantic, the pictures you see. There's definitely, again, something being done with intent. They are trying to conjure things out of the other entities and out of the other, not the other entities. They're trying to call things out of the other realms and other dimensions. And this story that came out recently about CERN now being the world's first time machine and have the ability to go in and put things in other dimensions and take things out of other dimensions. I think that these ancient, biblical stories and these stories about how, they were the Watchers or whoever were cast out of heaven. And we think about the Watchers and being the same people as the Custodians, and the Custodians coming and seeding life on planet Earth, and, giving the priest class and the elite the technology, the knowledge for this ancient technology. And it being held in the hands of the priests all these years is what has enabled the technological revolution and their power structure to grow. And now I'm thinking, it's a Trojan horse. I've thought this for the longest time. We've now built CERN for these people. The director of CERN, I have video of him in my Reality Evolution series Part 2 film, where the director of CERN on camera says that when you create an experiment like CERN, you have things that are going to happen, then you have other things are not going to happen. And one of the things that they didn't know was going to happen was that a wormhole was going to open up, and you were going to be able to put something in, take something out of it. In this article about CERN being the world's first time machine, they admit in this article that it's going to give them the ability to access up to 10 various different dimensions and to transport things between those two dimensions. This very well could be the elite building the technology on behalf of the Custodians to give them the ability to again, storm the gates of quote-unquote heaven or Sirius or wherever it is where they were cast out from. I mean, it's unbelievable. This stuff is absolutely real. I mean, you just can't even make it up.
Well, they certainly believe it's real. That's for sure. Well, you mentioned 10 separate dimensions. Isn't there 10 separate realms within the Sephiroth?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's within Kabbalism. Yes, tree life.
That's just incredible. The correlations. It never ends. I swear to God. I mean, this stuff, it's never ending, but it's extremely fascinating just to see how there's so many of these connections and all these correlations to what these people are doing and where the world is heading. And there's no question that all of this is leading to a system that they hope will establish a totalitarian world government system. And man, I mean, I certainly don't want to be around if that's if these are the people that are going to be in charge of the system, because these people are into some very dark things, and I don't think there's any question about that. But Josh, we're about up against the end of the show. We got about a couple minutes left. Is there anything you want to end with? Any final thoughts you want to leave the audience? Anything you want to plug? Feel free to do so.
All right. Well, thanks, Lee. Again, thanks for having me on again tonight, and look forward to not taking so long next time to come back on with you. But yeah, I just want to say again to the audience, and encourage everybody to continue to do their own research. And I think the only time that we don't see progressions in knowledge, the only time that we don't see progressions in understanding or new information coming out on these topics comes strictly from one thing and one thing alone, and that is from people not doing their own research. So I just want to continue to encourage everybody to dig, always fact check and double check everything Lee and I talk about, and come up with your own conclusions. And if you want to listen to my radio show or check out my documentary films or mini films or anything else I've done, there's lots of stuff on YouTube. Just Google Josh Reeves, or you can go to my website, www.theglobalreality.com, and we have the 24/7 radio network over there, and where my show broadcasts from. And you guys can go and check out everything on there. We have ways to support our work and what we're doing. So please support us. And thanks so much, Lee, for having me on.
Okay. Well, hey, Josh, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. It's been a great show. I had a good time. And yeah, I'm just going to end the broadcast right there. Thanks for everybody out there for tuning in. You can check out my website at roguegovernment.com. And I will be back again tomorrow. We'll cover more of the world order madness. And there's just so much going on. It's just completely insane. But yeah, thanks